The ivory silk gown felt suffocating around my throat as I stood outside the Alpha's chambers, my trembling hand frozen on the brass doorknob. Inside, I could hear the sounds that would shatter my entire world into irreparable fragments. Marcus's deep growl of pleasure, a feminine gasp that definitely wasn't mine, and the rhythmic creaking of the bed I was supposed to share with him tonight. "Please, Alpha Marcus," came the breathy plea that made my stomach drop like a stone into dark waters. "What if Elena finds out?" "Elena won't be a problem much longer." Marcus's voice was cold, calculated, devoid of any warmth I thought I'd known. "Once the alliance with her father's pack is secured, I'll reject her. You'll be my true Luna, Isabella. You always have been. Isabella, my best friend, my future sister-in-law, the woman who'd helped me select this very dress that now felt like chains wrapped around my body." The betrayal hit me like a physical assault, stealing the breath from my lungs as 26 years of lies crumbled around me like ancient ruins. The mate bond I'd felt so strongly, believed in so completely. The love I'd cherished as sacred truth. The future I'd painted in my mind with such vivid colors. All of it was nothing but a political maneuver, a game played with my heart as the disposable pawn. "She's so pathetic." Isabella's voice dripped with venom like poison from a serpent's fangs. "Walking around like she actually means something to you. Like she could ever be Luna material with her weakness and her desperate need for validation." "She served her purpose," Marcus replied, and I could hear the smirk coloring his voice like dark paint. "Her father's territory secured our southern border. Once that's locked in with the wedding ceremony, she becomes expendable. Just another piece removed from the board." "What about the mate bond?" Isabella asked, her voice softening with concern that felt like mockery now. Marcus's laugh was harsh, bitter, like broken glass grinding together. "There is no mate bond. I've been masking my scent with hers for months, making everyone believe we're fated mates. Chemical manipulation, nothing more. The moon goddess would never pair me with someone so weak, so utterly beneath my station." My legs gave out completely, and I slumped against the doorframe like a puppet with severed strings. The sound of my heart breaking was surely audible even through the thick wood. Every tender moment we'd shared, every whispered promise in the darkness, every time he'd touched me and made me believe I was his chosen one, his only one. All lies. Carefully constructed lies. The wedding was in 3 hours. 3 hours until I would have bound myself eternally to a man who saw me as nothing more than a political tool, a means to an end, disposable and forgettable. "I should go," Isabella whispered nervously. "The ceremony preparations." "Let them wait," Marcus growled possessively, and the sounds resumed with renewed vigor. I forced myself to stand, to walk away from that door on legs that felt like they'd been shattered, even though every step felt like walking on broken glass, shards piercing deep into my soul. The pack house buzzed with pre-wedding activity like a hive of industrious bees. Flowers being arranged in elaborate displays, tables being set with crystal and silver, my future being celebrated by people who all knew the truth. They all knew. Every single one of them. I could see it now with devastating clarity in the pitying glances that quickly looked away, the whispered conversations that stopped abruptly when I approached, the way no one could quite meet my eyes when they offered congratulations. Even my father, Beta Jonathan Rivers, had sold me like livestock to secure his position in the pack hierarchy. "Elena," my mother's voice cut through my spiraling thoughts like a knife. "There you are, darling. We need to get you ready. The hairdresser is waiting, and—" She stopped mid-sentence, her maternal instincts picking up on my distress like a wolf scenting blood. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I stared at her, this woman who'd raised me, who taught me about love and loyalty and the sacred nature of the mate bond, who'd read me fairy tales about true love conquering all. Had she known too? Had she been part of this conspiracy? "Did you know?" The words came out as barely a whisper, fragile as spider silk. Her face crumpled like old parchment, and I had my devastating answer written in her guilty expression. "Elena, sweetheart, did you know?" I repeated louder this time, my voice carrying the authority of my bloodline, the power I'd never really used before. "It's for the good of the pack," she whispered, tears streaming down her face in rivers of guilt. "Your father and Marcus, they know what's best for everyone. Sometimes we have to sacrifice personal happiness for—" I ran through the pack house like a wild thing, past the decorations mocking me with their cheerful colors and romantic symbolism, Past the wedding guests who'd come to witness my humiliation disguised as celebration. Past the life I'd thought was mine, but never had been. My wolf, Celeste, howled in my chest, feeling the betrayal as deeply as I did. Perhaps more deeply since her instincts had been telling her something was wrong for months. "We have to leave," she whispered urgently in my mind, her presence a comfort even in this nightmare. "They'll never let us go if we stay here. You know what they'll do." She was right. Even if I refused to go through with the ceremony, even if I stood up in front of everyone and declared the truth, my father would force me. I was his property in their eyes, his bargaining chip, his ticket to power. And Marcus would take me whether I was willing or not. Forced matings weren't uncommon in traditional packs, especially when politics were involved. I made it to my room and grabbed a small backpack, stuffing it with clothes and what little money I'd saved from the small allowance they gave me. The wedding dress felt heavy on my shoulders, a reminder of my naivety, my blind trust, my foolish belief in love. But I didn't have time to change, didn't have time for anything but escape. The forest called to me as I slipped out the back of the pack house through the servants' entrance, the familiar scent of pine and earth offering the only comfort I could find in this moment of complete devastation. I'd grown up in these woods, knew every trail and hidden path like I knew my own heartbeat. If I could make it to the northern border, I could escape into neutral territory. I could disappear. Behind me, I heard shouts of alarm echoing through the pack house. They discovered my absence, my empty room, my missing belongings. "Find her," Marcus's voice carried on the wind, amplified by his alpha power. "She can't have gone far. Check every exit, every path. I want her found immediately." I ran harder, my wolf's strength pushing me forward even as my heart shattered with every step, pieces falling away like breadcrumbs marking my trail. The wedding dress was a liability, catching on branches and slowing me down with its delicate fabric and elaborate train. But I couldn't stop to change. Couldn't risk the time. The sound of howls filled the air behind me, drawing closer. They'd shifted to wolf form to track me faster, their superior speed eating up the distance between us. My scent would be easy to follow, especially wearing Marcus's scent from months of his deception, months of careful manipulation. "The river," Celeste urged desperately. "We can mask our scent in the water. It's our only chance." I pushed toward the sound of rushing water, my lungs burning with exertion, branches tearing at my dress and skin. The northern river marked the boundary between Moonhaven Pack territory and the wildlands beyond. Territory that belonged to no pack, where rogues and worse things roamed freely. Dangerous territory. Deadly territory. But anything was better than being forced into a lie of a marriage. Better than living as property. Better than pretending for the rest of my life. The riverbank appeared ahead through the trees, and I didn't hesitate before plunging into the icy water. The current was strong, threatening to drag me downstream and under. But I fought against it with everything I had, using every ounce of strength to reach the far shore. The cold was shocking, stealing my breath, but I welcomed it. Physical pain was easier to bear than emotional devastation. When I finally dragged myself onto the opposite bank, I was in no man's land, truly alone for the first time in my life. The very air felt different here. Wilder, more dangerous, charged with ancient power. The trees were taller, their shadows deeper and more menacing. And there was an underlying scent of something powerful and predatory that made every instinct scream at me to go back. But I was free. For the first time in my life, I was free. "Elena," Marcus's voice carried across the water, filled with fury that promised retribution. "Get back here immediately. You belong to me." I turned to face him across the river. This man who'd played with my heart like it was a toy, who'd lied to me for years. He stood on the opposite shore in his human form, his perfect features twisted with rage that made him ugly. "I belong to no one," I called back, my voice stronger than I felt, powered by newfound determination. "You're making a mistake," he snarled, his alpha power pressing against me even from this distance. "Those are the wildlands, Elena. You'll die out there, alone and unprotected. Better to die free than live as your lie." I replied, then turned and walked into the forest, leaving my old life and my broken heart behind me like discarded shells. The silence of the wildlands was absolute, oppressive, broken only by my ragged breathing and the distant sound of water. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, to accept my fate, to choose the safety of the known over the terror of the unknown. But I pushed forward into the darkness, into uncertainty, into whatever destiny awaited me beyond the boundaries of everything I'd ever known. I had no idea that I was walking directly into the territory of the most feared alpha in the werewolf world, or that my real life was just beginning. I had no idea that the man I was about to meet would change everything. Not just for me, but for every wolf in North America. The wildlands were nothing like the carefully maintained forests of Pack territory that I'd known all my life. Here, the trees grew twisted and ancient, their branches forming a canopy so thick that barely any sunlight penetrated to the forest floor, leaving everything in perpetual twilight. The silence was oppressive, unnatural, broken only by the occasional rustle of unseen creatures in the underbrush that made my heart race. I'd been walking for hours, my wedding dress now torn and muddied beyond recognition, the delicate silk no match for the harsh terrain and thorny undergrowth. My feet were bleeding in the impractical shoes I'd worn for a ceremony that would never happen, white satin stained red with my blood. But I couldn't bring myself to care about the pain. Physical pain was nothing compared to the gaping wound in my chest where my heart used to be, where trust used to live. "We need to find shelter," Celeste murmured urgently in my mind, her anxiety bleeding into my consciousness. "Night is coming, and this place, it doesn't feel safe. There's something wrong here, something ancient and dangerous." She was right. The very air seemed to throb with an otherworldly energy that made my skin prickle with warning, and I could sense eyes watching me from the shadows. Not animal eyes, but something far more intelligent and predatory. A low growl rumbled through the trees, deep and primal, raising every hair on my body in instinctive fear. It was the sound of a predator that had never known fear itself, a creature at the top of the food chain. I froze like prey, my breath catching in my throat as I tried desperately to locate the source of the sound, my eyes scanning the shadows frantically. "Well, well," a voice drawled from somewhere in the darkness, sending chills down my spine. "What do we have here?" 3 figures emerged from the shadows like nightmares given form. Rogues by the look of them, their clothes dirty and torn, their eyes gleaming with a feral hunger that made my stomach turn with dread. The leader, a tall man with scars crisscrossing his face like a map of violence, smiled to reveal teeth filed to sharp points. "A little lost bride," he continued, circling me like a predator sizing up prey. "All dressed up with nowhere to go. How tragic. How perfect." "Stay back," I warned, though my voice shook with fear I couldn't control. "I'm not looking for trouble. I just want to pass through peacefully." "Trouble found you, sweetheart," the second rogue said, stepping closer with deliberate menace. "You're in Blackwood territory now, the Shadow King's domain." Blackwood. Even in Pack territory, that name was whispered in fear like a curse. Damien Blackwood, the alpha who'd never been defeated in battle, who'd single-handedly destroyed 3 rival packs in a single night. They called him the Shadow King because he was said to be more monster than man, more demon than wolf. "Lucky for you," the leader continued with false benevolence. "We found you before he did. He doesn't take kindly to trespassers, but we might be willing to offer you protection. For a price, of course." The way he looked at me made my skin crawl with revulsion, made me want to scrub myself clean. I took a step backward, my mind racing for options even as terror threatened to paralyze me. I was outnumbered, exhausted, and in completely unfamiliar territory. Even if I could shift to my wolf form, I wouldn't stand a chance against 3 rogues who'd clearly survived in these dangerous lands. "I don't have anything to give you," I said, still backing away, desperately searching for an escape route. "Oh, but you do." The third rogue spoke for the first time, his voice rough with disuse and dark promise. "You have yourself. And in the wildlands, that's the most valuable currency there is." They moved to surround me with practiced coordination, and I realized with growing horror that I'd escaped one nightmare only to fall into another. I was completely alone with no pack to call for help, no allies to rely on, no one who even knew where I was. The leader reached for me, his fingers brushing against my arm like acid, and Celeste snarled in my mind with protective fury. The touch felt wrong, violating, and I jerked away with a sound of disgust. "Don't touch me. You don't get to make demands here, little bride," he snarled, grabbing my wrist with bruising force that made me cry out. "You're going to learn your place very quickly." The growl that interrupted him was unlike anything I'd ever heard before. It was the sound of pure, unleashed fury, of a predator that had found something threatening its territory. The trees themselves seemed to shudder with the force of it, leaves trembling and falling like rain. The rogues froze instantly, their faces going pale with terror I'd never seen before. "Run," the leader whispered, but it was too late. He emerged from the shadows like vengeance itself, like a god of war made flesh. Tall and broad-shouldered, he radiated a power that made my knees weak and my wolf whimper with recognition. His dark hair was wild and untamed, his clothes simple but well-made, and his eyes were the color of molten silver, filled with an inhuman intelligence that saw everything. Damien Blackwood, the Shadow King himself. He took in the scene with a single glance. The rogues surrounding me, their hands on my body, my obvious distress and torn dress, and his expression darkened with a rage that promised violence and death. "You dare," he said, his voice pitched so low it was barely more than a rumble that I felt in my bones. "To touch what is mine. Mine." I didn't have time to process that statement before he moved with impossible speed. I understood then why he was called the Shadow King. He was faster than should have been possible for any creature, stronger than any alpha I'd ever seen, and absolutely ruthless in his violence. The first rogue didn't even have time to scream before Damien's hand closed around his throat with crushing force. There was a sickening crack that echoed through the forest, and the body hit the ground with a heavy thud. The other two tried to run, but Damien was on them before they'd taken 3 steps. His claws extended, gleaming like silver blades in the dim light, and the forest was filled with sounds I never wanted to hear again, sounds of bone breaking and flesh tearing. When it was over, when the 3 rogues lay dead at his feet, Damien turned to me. His silver eyes were still glowing with inhuman power, and I could see the beast lurking just beneath the surface of his human facade, something ancient and terrible. I should have been terrified. I should have run screaming into the forest. Instead, I felt safe. For the first time since I discovered Marcus's betrayal, I felt protected, like I could finally breathe again. "Are you hurt?" His voice was gentler now, though still rough with the aftermath of violence. I shook my head, not trusting my voice, unable to form words. He stepped closer, and I caught his scent, pine and cedar, and something wild and masculine that made Celeste whimper with recognition deep in my soul. Something that felt like home, like destiny, like everything I'd been searching for without knowing it. "You're on my territory," he said, studying me with those impossible silver eyes that seemed to see straight through to my soul. "Moonhaven Pack by your scent. What's a pack wolf doing in the wildlands alone in a wedding dress?" I started, then stopped, not sure how to explain the disaster my life had become in a way that made sense. "I'm not pack anymore." His eyes sharpened with interest, becoming even more intense. "Rogue then. Exiled." It wasn't technically true, but it was close enough to the truth that it didn't feel like a lie. "Yes." He was quiet for a long moment, and I could feel him assessing me, weighing options I couldn't guess at, making decisions that would determine my fate. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken questions and possibilities. "You're coming with me," he finally said, turning and walking deeper into the forest with confident strides. "Wait," I called after him desperately. I didn't agree to. He stopped and looked back at me, and the intensity of his gaze made my protests die in my throat like candles snuffed out. "You have 2 choices," he said with calm certainty. "Come with me, or stay here and wait for the next group of rogues to find you. I guarantee they won't be as easy to deal with as these 3, and I won't be here to save you again." I looked at the bodies scattered around us like discarded puppets, then at the deepening shadows of the forest that seemed to pulse with hidden dangers. He was right. I wouldn't survive another encounter like this one. I had no supplies, no weapons, no knowledge of this territory. "Fine," I said, lifting my chin with what little dignity I had left. "But I'm not your prisoner." Something that might have been amusement flickered in his silver eyes, there and gone like lightning. "No," he agreed quietly. "You're not my prisoner." As I followed him deeper into his territory, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just stepped from one dangerous situation into another that was potentially even more perilous. But there was something about Damien Blackwood, something beyond his obvious power and lethal grace, that called to a part of me I'd never known existed. Celeste stirred restlessly in my mind, whimpering with a need I didn't understand, pressing against my consciousness with unusual insistence. "Mate," she whispered so quietly I almost missed it, so softly I could pretend I hadn't heard. "Impossible." I'd just escaped one false mate bond. I couldn't be walking into another. Couldn't be foolish enough to trust that feeling again. Could I? But as we walked through the darkening forest, I couldn't ignore the way my body responded to his presence. The way my heart raced when he looked at me. The way everything about him felt like coming home after a long journey. The way my soul seemed to recognize his even though we'd just met. The Shadow King had claimed I was his. The question was, what did that mean for both of us? And was I brave enough to find out? Damien's territory was unlike anything I'd ever seen or imagined. Where pack lands were carefully maintained and organized with clear boundaries, his domain felt wild and primal, as if the very forest bent to his will rather than the other way around. Ancient trees formed natural corridors with their intertwined branches, creating a canopy that blocked out most of the sky and cast everything in mysterious shadows. We walked in silence for what felt like hours. The only sounds our footsteps on the thick carpet of fallen leaves and the distant call of night birds echoing through the trees. I was exhausted, my feet bleeding freely now, leaving a trail behind us, but I refused to show weakness. Not in front of him. Not when I was trying to prove I deserved to be here. Damien moved with the fluid grace of a predator, never making a sound despite his considerable size. Every few minutes, he would glance back at me with those intense silver eyes, checking on me, but he never slowed his pace or offered to help. It was a test, I realized. He was measuring my strength, my determination, my ability to keep up. Just when I thought I couldn't take another step, when my vision was starting to blur with exhaustion and pain, we emerged into a clearing dominated by the most magnificent structure I'd ever seen. It wasn't quite a house and wasn't quite a fortress. It was something uniquely his, something that defied easy categorization. Built into and around a massive oak tree that had to be centuries old, the dwelling seemed to grow from the forest itself, wood and stone blending seamlessly with living bark and branches. Multiple levels spiraled up the trunk, connected by natural stairs and carved pathways. "Welcome to Shadowmere," Damien said, the first words he'd spoken since we'd left the bodies of the rogues behind. "Your new home if you choose to stay. I searched for words that wouldn't sound foolish. It's incredible, like something from a fairy tale." He didn't respond, but I caught the faint curve of his lips that might have been approval or satisfaction. He led me up a winding staircase carved directly into the trunk of the great tree, past levels that offered glimpses into rooms I couldn't fully see. A library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, an armory filled with weapons that gleamed in the low light, spaces whose purposes I could only guess at. The main living area was both rustic and luxurious, with furniture that looked handcrafted and built to last centuries. A massive stone fireplace dominated one wall, already laid with wood and ready to light. Windows had been cut into the living tree with such skill that they didn't damage it, looking out over the forest canopy like portals to another world. "You can clean up," Damien said, gesturing toward a door that presumably led to a bathroom. "There are clothes in the bedroom that should fit. Take whatever you need." I wanted to ask whose clothes they were, but exhaustion was winning over curiosity. "Thank you." He nodded and turned toward the fireplace, dismissing me with that simple gesture. I made my way to the bathroom, grateful for a moment to process everything that had happened, to try to make sense of the impossible turns my life had taken in less than a day. The bathroom was as impressive as the rest of the dwelling, with a massive tub carved from a single piece of stone that must have weighed tons. I started the water running, adjusting the temperature until it was almost scalding, then began peeling off the ruined wedding dress. Each piece that hit the floor represented another part of my old life I was leaving behind. The naive girl who'd believed in fairy tales, the daughter who'd trusted her parents, the bride who'd thought she'd found true love. The hot water was absolute bliss against my battered body. I soaked until my fingers pruned and the water started to cool, letting the heat work out the knots of tension and fear that had settled into my muscles like rocks. When I finally climbed out, I felt almost human again, almost like I could face whatever came next. The clothes Damien had mentioned were laid out on the bed. Simple but well-made pants and a soft sweater that was definitely too large for me, but would work well enough. They smelled faintly of pine and something else, something feminine that made my stomach clench. Had they belonged to another woman? His mate. The thought sent an unexpected stab of jealousy through me that I quickly pushed aside. It was none of my business who Damien Blackwood had been with, None of my business what his romantic history included. When I returned to the main room, Damien was sitting in a chair by the fire, a glass of what looked like whiskey in his hand. He'd changed clothes as well, trading his forest gear for dark jeans and a simple t-shirt that did nothing to hide the impressive breadth of his shoulders or the power contained in his frame. "Better?" he asked without looking at me. "Much. Thank you." I hesitated in the doorway, unsure if I was welcome to sit, unsure of my place in this strange new world. He gestured to the couch across from him with casual authority. "Sit. You look like you're about to fall over, and I'd rather not have to catch you." I settled onto the surprisingly comfortable cushions, suddenly aware of how strange this situation was, how bizarre my new reality had become. A few hours ago, I'd been preparing for my wedding. Now I was sitting in the home of the most feared alpha in the werewolf world, wearing clothes that probably belonged to his lover. "Tell me about Moonhaven," Damien said, his voice cutting through my spiraling thoughts. "What do you want to know?" "Everything." His silver eyes fixed on mine with an intensity that made my heart skip. "Start with why you're really here." I could lie, make up some story about being exiled for minor infractions, protect what little pride I had left. But something about Damien demanded honesty, and I found myself telling him everything. The false mate bond, Marcus's betrayal with my best friend, the wedding that was nothing more than a political alliance, my family's complicity in the deception. Damien listened without interruption, his expression never changing, but I could see something dark and dangerous building in his silver eyes like storm clouds gathering. "They sold you," he said when I finished, his voice flat with barely controlled fury. "Essentially, yes. And you ran. What else was I supposed to do?" I asked, hearing the defensiveness in my voice. "Let them force me into a marriage based on lies? Spend my life as a political pawn? Most pack wolves would have accepted their fate," Damien said, studying me with renewed interest. "Duty to the pack above personal desires. That's what they're taught from birth." "Then most pack wolves are idiots," I replied, surprised by my own vehemence. Damien's laugh was low and rich, the first genuine emotion I'd seen from him. Spoken like a true Luna. "I'm not a Luna," I said quickly, the title feeling like salt in fresh wounds. I was never really going to be one. Marcus made that abundantly clear. "Marcus is a fool," Damien said, and there was something in his voice that made me shiver. He had no idea what he was throwing away. "You don't know me," I protested. I could be everything he said, weak, pathetic, not Luna material. Damien was quiet for a long moment, and I could feel him weighing his words carefully. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than I'd expected. "I've seen weak wolves, Elena Rivers. I've seen pathetic ones. You walked into the wildlands alone in a wedding dress with no weapons and no backup plan. You survived an encounter with rogues and followed me through territory that would terrify seasoned warriors. Weak wolves don't do that." The way he said my name made something flutter in my chest like captured butterflies. "How do you know my name?" "I know everything that happens in the packs surrounding my territory," Damien replied with certainty, "including the upcoming wedding between Marcus Blackwood and the Beta's daughter. The marriage that was supposed to cement the alliance between Moonhaven and Iron Ridge packs. You knew about the politics. Politics are what keep the peace, Elena," he said, leaning forward. "Or start wars. Your father made a miscalculation. He thought he could use you to secure his position, but he underestimated Marcus's ambition." "What do you mean?" "Marcus never intended to honor the agreement," Damien said grimly. "He plans to absorb Moonhaven into Iron Ridge within the year. The marriage to you was just the first step. Once he had legitimate access to your territory, he would have challenged your father for leadership and taken over both packs." The revelation hit me like a physical blow, stealing my breath. "But that would mean war." "Yes," Damien confirmed. "Other packs wouldn't tolerate such an obvious power grab. The region would have erupted in violence, and thousands would have died. And I would have been right in the middle of it," I whispered, the full horror of what I'd escaped beginning to dawn. "You would have been the first casualty," Damien said grimly. "Marcus would have had you killed once your father was dead. Can't have loose ends, can't have someone who might rally opposition." I felt sick, bile rising in my throat. The betrayal had been so much worse than I'd realized. They hadn't just been using me. They'd been planning to murder me, planning to dispose of me like trash once I'd served my purpose. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice shaking. Damien was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire as if searching for answers in the flames. When he finally looked back at me, there was something vulnerable in his expression, quickly masked but unmistakable. "Because you deserve to know the truth," he said. "And because you're safe here. No one will hurt you in my territory. I give you my word." "Why?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. "Why do you care what happens to me?" Damien stood abruptly, moving to the window to stare out at the dark forest like he couldn't bear to look at me. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken truths and possibilities that terrified me. "Get some rest," he said finally, not turning around. "Tomorrow we'll discuss what comes next." It was clearly a dismissal, but I couldn't let it go, couldn't ignore the tension crackling between us like electricity. "Damien, the bedroom is yours," he said, cutting me off. "I'll take the couch. I can't kick you out of your own bed." "Elena." The way he said my name was both warning and plea. "Please, just get some rest." I wanted to push, to demand answers to the questions swirling in my mind like a storm. But exhaustion was winning, dragging me down like quicksand. Tomorrow I would get answers. Tomorrow I would figure out what happened next. But as I settled into Damien's bed, surrounded by his scent and the sound of his restless movement in the next room, I couldn't shake Celeste's whispered words from earlier. "Mate, was it possible? Could the moon goddess have led me here, to him, for a reason? Or was I just desperately grasping for meaning in the wreckage of my life? Only time would tell." But as I drifted off to sleep, I felt safer than I had in years, protected by the most dangerous alpha in the werewolf world. The Shadow King had claimed I was his. Maybe it was time to find out what that really meant. Dear listener, if this tale has captured your heart, if Elena's courage and Damien's mysterious protection have awakened something within you, then don't let this journey slip away into silence. Subscribe now, because the next chapter holds revelations that will change everything. Ancient prophecies unveiled, deadly enemies closing in, and a connection between Elena and Damien that defies everything they thought they knew about fate itself. The real story is just beginning, and you deserve to witness every breathtaking moment. Subscribe, and let's discover together what destiny has in store for our runaway bride and her Shadow King. I woke to the sound of howls in the distance. Not the lonely call of rogues, but the organized hunting cry of a coordinated pack. My blood ran cold as recognition hit me like ice water. Moonhaven Pack. They'd found me. Sunlight was streaming through the windows, and I realized I'd slept far later than intended, exhausted beyond measure. The sound of movement from the main room told me Damien was already up and aware of our visitors, already preparing for whatever confrontation was coming. I dressed quickly and found him standing at the window, his expression grim as he watched the forest below. He was fully dressed in dark combat gear, and I could see weapons strapped to his body. Silver knives, a gun, and what looked like a small crossbow designed for supernatural targets. "How many?" I asked, moving to stand beside him at the window. 26, Damien replied without turning. "Full hunting party. Marcus isn't taking any chances this time." "I should go," I said, though the words felt like ashes in my mouth, bitter and choking. "This isn't your fight." Damien turned to me then, his silver eyes blazing with fury so intense it made me step back. "You think I'd let them take you? They're not here for a fight," I protested, even though I didn't believe it myself. "They just want me back. If I go willingly." "They'll kill you the moment you're out of my sight," Damien interrupted, his voice hard as steel. "Marcus can't afford to let you live, Elena. Not with what you know about his plans." The howls were getting closer, and I could hear the sound of paws hitting the forest floor at a run, multiple wolves moving in coordinated formation. They were moving fast, confident in their numbers and purpose. "Stay here," Damien ordered, moving toward the door with predatory grace. "No." The word came out sharper than I'd intended, louder. "I won't hide while you fight my battles." "Elena, they're here because of me," I said, meeting his gaze with all the determination I could muster. "I won't let you get hurt protecting me." Damien studied me for a long moment, then nodded grimly. "Fine, but you stay behind me, and you do exactly what I say." "Understood." "Understood." We descended the treehouse together, Damien moving with the fluid grace of a predator preparing for battle, every muscle coiled and ready. The moment we reached the ground, I could smell them. The familiar scent of my former pack mixed with anger and determination, the scent of wolves on a mission. They emerged from the forest in a coordinated formation, still in wolf form, but spreading out to surround us in a tactical pattern that spoke of military training. Marcus was in the lead, his gray wolf form larger than the others, his eyes glowing with alpha power and possessive fury. The change when he saw me was immediate and visceral. His lips pulled back in a snarl of rage, and I could feel his alpha command pressing against my mind like physical pressure, trying to force me to submit, to come to him. But something had changed. The command that would have dropped me to my knees yesterday barely registered now, like trying to push through water instead of air. I stood straighter, meeting his gaze without flinching, without the automatic submission I'd been conditioned to show. Marcus shifted to human form, his pack following suit with synchronized precision. He was dressed in tactical gear, armed and ready for war, but his attention was focused entirely on me with laser intensity. "Elena," he said, his voice carrying the false warmth I now recognized as manipulation, as carefully calculated deception. "Thank the moon goddess you're safe. We've been so worried about you." "Worried?" I laughed, the sound bitter and harsh. "Is that what you call it?" "You're confused, sweetheart," Marcus continued, taking a step forward with feigned concern. Damien moved to intercept him immediately, and the temperature in the clearing seemed to drop several degrees, frost forming on nearby leaves. "That's close enough," Damien said, his voice carrying an authority that made Marcus's wolves shift nervously, their instincts recognizing a superior predator. "Blackwood." Marcus's greeting was cold, formal, stripped of any pretense. "I'm here for my mate. This doesn't concern you." "Your mate?" Damien's laugh was dark, dangerous, like distant thunder. "Is that what you're calling her now?" I could see Marcus's jaw clench, but he maintained his facade of righteous concern. "Elena is my fated mate. She's clearly been traumatized by something, probably rogue attacks, and isn't thinking clearly. I'm here to bring her home where she belongs. The only thing that traumatized her was finding you in bed with her best friend on her wedding day," Damien replied, and I watched Marcus's mask slip for just a moment, revealing the calculating predator beneath. "I don't know what lies she's told you." "Isabella," I said quietly, and Marcus's mouth snapped shut. "Isabella Blackwood, your sister-in-law, the woman you promised would be your true Luna once you disposed of me like garbage." The silence that followed was deafening. I could see shock and confusion rippling through the faces of Marcus's pack members. Wolves who hadn't known about his betrayal, who'd believed in the fairy tale of fated mates. "Elena." Marcus's voice was harder now, dropping the pretense of concern. "You're being hysterical. Whatever you think you heard." "I heard you planning my murder," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the clearing, reaching every wolf present. "After you used me to secure the alliance with my father's pack, you were going to kill me and take over Moonhaven. Every word, every lie, every promise, all of it was just a game to you." Murmurs rippled through Marcus's pack like wind through grass. These were wolves who had known me since childhood, who had watched me grow up believing I would be their Luna. The idea that their alpha would murder the beta's daughter for political gain was clearly disturbing to them, challenging everything they thought they knew. "Enough," Marcus snarled, his alpha power flaring out like a weapon. "You're coming home, Elena. Now." "No," I said simply, the word carrying more power than I'd ever felt before. Marcus's eyes widened in shock, genuine surprise breaking through his careful control. In all the years we'd known each other, I'd never directly defied him, never challenged his authority. Pack hierarchy demanded obedience to the alpha, and I'd been raised to follow that law without question, without thought. "You're refusing a direct alpha command." Marcus's voice was deadly quiet, vibrating with barely contained rage. "You're not my alpha," I replied, and the words felt like freedom, like chains breaking. "You never were." Marcus's control snapped like a breaking rope. He lunged forward, shifting mid-leap, his wolf form aimed directly at me with lethal intent. But he never made contact. Damien moved faster than should have been possible, intercepting Marcus's attack with casual ease that spoke of vast experience. His hand closed around Marcus's throat, and suddenly the Moonhaven Alpha was pinned against a tree, his feet dangling off the ground, struggling uselessly. "I warned you," Damien said conversationally, as if he wasn't casually overpowering an alpha werewolf. "That was close enough." Marcus struggled against Damien's grip, but it was useless, futile. The difference in their power was obvious, undeniable. Damien was in a completely different league, operating on a level Marcus couldn't even comprehend. Let him go. One of Marcus's warriors stepped forward, hand moving to his weapon with aggressive intent. Damien's eyes flicked to the warrior, and the man froze mid-motion, paralyzed. The wave of power that rolled off the Shadow King was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Ancient, primal, and absolutely terrifying in its intensity. It spoke of centuries of dominance, of power that transcended normal werewolf strength. "I could kill all of you," Damien said calmly, his voice carrying to every member of Marcus's pack with crystal clarity. "It would take me less than 5 minutes, and not one of you would land a blow. The only reason you're still breathing is because Elena asked me not to start a war." He released Marcus, who dropped to the ground gasping for air, his pride wounded as badly as his throat. But Damien's patience was clearly at its limit. "This isn't over, Blackwood," Marcus snarled, struggling to his feet with as much dignity as he could salvage. "Yes," Damien replied quietly, with absolute certainty. "It is." Marcus turned to me, and I could see the calculation in his eyes, the wheels turning as he tried a different approach. "Elena, think about what you're doing. Your family, your pack, they need you. Your father's position depends on this alliance." "My father sold me," I said, the truth bitter on my tongue but necessary. "Just like you did. I don't owe either of you anything." "You're making a mistake," Marcus snarled, his facade finally dropping completely to reveal the monster beneath. "You think the Shadow King cares about you? He's using you just like everyone else. The moment he gets bored, he'll throw you away like trash." The words hit harder than they should have, finding the insecure places in my heart that Marcus had always been skilled at exploiting, had always known how to wound. But before doubt could take hold, before fear could paralyze me, Damien spoke. "The only mistake here is yours, Blackwood," Damien said, moving to stand beside me in a gesture of solidarity. "You had something precious, and you threw it away for political gain. That makes you not just a fool, but a dead man walking." Marcus's eyes widened at the threat, finally understanding the danger he was in. But Damien wasn't finished. "If I see you or any member of your pack on my territory again, I'll consider it an act of war. And trust me, you don't want to go to war with me." "The council won't stand for this," Marcus threatened, grasping at straws. "Harboring another pack's mate." "Elena Rivers is no longer a member of Moonhaven Pack," Damien interrupted with absolute authority. "As of this moment, she's under my protection as a refugee seeking asylum. The council recognizes the right of asylum, Marcus. Even you should know that." Marcus's jaw worked furiously, but he couldn't argue with werewolf law, couldn't challenge centuries of tradition. The right of asylum was sacred, dating back to when packs were constantly at war and wolves needed safe havens. "This isn't over," Marcus said again, but the threat rang hollow now, empty. "Yes," Damien replied quietly. "It is." Marcus gestured to his pack, and they began to withdraw, defeated. But not before several of his warriors looked back at me with something that might have been apology in their eyes, regret for what their alpha had done. These were wolves I'd grown up with, and seeing the truth about their alpha was clearly difficult for them. When the last Moonhaven wolf had disappeared into the forest, I finally allowed myself to breathe, the tension draining from my body like water. "Are you all right?" Damien asked, his voice gentler now that we were alone. "I think so," I said, though my hands were shaking with adrenaline and delayed shock. "Thank you for standing up to him." "You stood up to him first," Damien pointed out, and there was approval in his voice. "Refusing an alpha command. That takes courage most wolves never find." "It didn't feel like courage," I admitted, my voice small. "It felt like desperation, like survival." Damien was quiet for a moment, studying me with those intense silver eyes that seemed to see everything. "The mate bond," he said finally. "You said it was false." Marcus was masking his scent with mine, making everyone believe we were fated mates when we weren't. Chemical manipulation. "But you felt something," Damien observed. I nodded reluctantly, not wanting to admit how foolish I'd been. "I thought I did, but it was all manipulation, all lies." Damien stepped closer, and suddenly the air between us was charged with something electric, something that made my skin tingle and my heart race. "What do you feel now?" The question was loaded with meaning, and I knew he wasn't asking about my general emotional state. He was asking about him, about the pull I'd been fighting since the moment we met, the connection that Celeste kept insisting was real. "I don't know," I whispered, though it was a lie. I knew exactly what I was feeling. The same pull I'd thought was the mate bond with Marcus, but stronger, deeper, more real than anything I'd ever experienced. It was terrifying in its intensity. Damien reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and cupped my face in his large hands. His touch was gentle, reverent, and I felt myself leaning into it without conscious thought, drawn to him like a moth to flame. "Elena," he said softly, and my name on his lips sounded like a prayer, like a promise. Celeste was going wild in my mind, pressing against my consciousness with a need so strong it almost overwhelmed me, urging me toward him with primal insistence. But I was afraid to trust it, afraid to believe that something so perfect could be real after Marcus's deception. "I can't," I whispered, stepping back from his touch, from the temptation he represented. "I can't go through that again." Damien's hands dropped to his sides, but his eyes never left mine, burning with intensity. "I know," he said quietly, and I could hear the understanding in his voice. "But this is different, Elena. What's between us? It's real. How can you be sure?" I asked desperately, wanting to believe but terrified of being fooled again. Damien was quiet for a long moment, and I could see him wrestling with something internal, some decision he was trying to make. When he spoke again, his voice was raw with honesty. "Because I've been waiting for you my entire life," he said, the words hitting me like physical force. "Because the moment I caught your scent, my wolf recognized his mate. Because touching you feels like coming home after centuries of wandering in the dark, lost and alone." His words sent shivers through me, resonating with something deep in my soul. But I was still afraid to believe, still wounded. "What if you're wrong?" I whispered. "What if it's just?" "It's not," Damien interrupted, stepping closer again, invading my space. "Look at me, Elena. Really look at me." I met his eyes and suddenly I could see it. The silver flecks that marked a true mate bond. The way his pupils dilated when he looked at me. The barely controlled hunger that had nothing to do with violence and everything to do with claiming, with possessing, with loving. "You feel it too," he said, and it wasn't a question but a statement of absolute certainty. I did feel it. The pull, the need, the absolute certainty that this man was meant to be mine, and I was meant to be his. But admitting it felt like stepping off a cliff without knowing if there was anything to catch me, without any guarantee of safety. "I'm scared," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "So am I," Damien replied, and the honesty in his voice undid me completely, broke down the last of my defenses. Before I could lose my nerve, before fear could paralyze me again, I reached up and pulled his head down to mine, pressing my lips to his in a kiss that felt like lightning and coming home all at once, like finding something I'd been searching for my entire life. Damien groaned against my mouth, his arms coming around me to hold me close, and I knew with absolute certainty that this was real. This was what a true mate bond felt like. Not the pale imitation Marcus had created with chemicals and lies, but the real thing, the genuine article. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Damien rested his forehead against mine with a tenderness that made my heart ache. "Mine," he whispered, and the possessive claim sent heat racing through my veins like wildfire. "Yours," I whispered back, and meant it completely, surrendering to the truth I'd been fighting. But even as we stood there, lost in each other, I couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus's threat wasn't empty, that this wasn't truly over. This wasn't the end of our troubles. If anything, it was just the beginning of something far more dangerous. But beautiful soul, if you're feeling the pull of this journey, if Elena's courage and Damien's fierce protection are stirring something in your own heart, then subscribe now, because what's coming next will test everything they've discovered. Ancient prophecies are about to be revealed, deadly enemies are gathering their forces, and the true cost of their mate bond will demand sacrifices neither of them anticipated. The real battle hasn't even begun, and you won't want to miss a single moment of what happens when the council returns with their full force. Hit that subscribe button, and let's walk together into the storm that's gathering on the horizon. Damien's kiss had awakened something in me that I'd never experienced with Marcus, a burning need that seemed to consume me from the inside out, rewriting everything I thought I knew about desire. As we stood in the clearing where he'd just faced down my former pack, I could barely focus on anything beyond the feel of his hands on my skin and the wild racing of my heart against my ribs. "We should go inside," Damien said, his voice rough with restraint, with barely controlled need. I nodded, not trusting my voice, and followed him back to the treehouse. The climb up the winding stairs felt eternal. every step making me more aware of his presence behind me, the heat radiating from his body, the way his scent seemed to wrap around me like a physical touch. Inside, the atmosphere was charged with unspoken desire, crackling with electricity. Damien moved to the fireplace, busying himself with building a fire even though the day was warm, and I could see the tension in his shoulders, the careful way he was controlling his movements. "Damien," I said softly, and he stilled, his hands frozen on the piece of what he'd been about to place on the growing flames. "I know this is happening fast," I continued, moving closer to him, drawn by forces I couldn't name. "I know we barely know each other, but what I feel when I'm with you, it's nothing like what I thought I had with Marcus." Damien turned to face me, and the raw hunger in his silver eyes made my breath catch in my throat, made heat pool low in my belly. "Elena," he said, his voice rough, "if we do this, if we complete the mate bond, there's no going back. You'll be mine completely, and I'll be yours forever. Is that what you want? Is that what you want?" I asked, stepping close enough to touch him, close enough to feel his heat. "I've wanted it since the moment I saw you," Damien admitted, his hands coming up to frame my face with surprising gentleness. "But I need to know you're sure. I need to know you're choosing this, choosing me, not just running from your past." I thought about his question, really considered it despite the desire clouding my thoughts. Was I running from Marcus and the pain of his betrayal? Probably, at least partially. But what I felt for Damien was so much more than just escape, so much deeper than simple reaction. It was recognition, completion, like finding a piece of myself I hadn't known was missing, like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. "I'm sure," I said, and meant it completely, surrendering to the truth of it. Damien's control snapped like a breaking rope. He kissed me with a desperation that matched my own, his hands tangling in my hair as he walked me backward toward the bedroom. I could feel his wolf pressing against his human facade, demanding, claiming, and Celeste rose to meet him with equal ferocity, equal need. "Wait," Damien said suddenly, pulling back with visible effort. "There's something you need to know first." I blinked up at him, my mind foggy with desire and confusion. "What?" Damien ran a hand through his dark hair, clearly struggling with whatever he needed to tell me. "The reason I'm called the Shadow King, it's not just because of my reputation in battle. I don't understand. I'm not entirely wolf, Elena. My mother was human, but my father, he was something else, something older and more dangerous. The beast inside me isn't just a wolf." I studied his face, seeing the vulnerability beneath his usual confidence, the fear that I might reject him. "What are you trying to tell me?" "I'm trying to tell you that mating with me might change you in ways you can't imagine," he said seriously. "The bond between us will be stronger than anything you've ever experienced, but it might also awaken parts of yourself you didn't know existed." The warning should have scared me, should have made me hesitate. Any rational person would have stepped back, demanded more information, insisted on time to consider the implications. Instead, I found myself reaching for him with renewed determination. "I don't care," I said simply, meaning it with every fiber of my being. "Elena, I don't care," I repeated, pulling him down for another kiss. "Whatever you are, whatever this makes me, I don't care. I choose you." Damien groaned against my lips, his restraint finally crumbling completely. He lifted me easily, carrying me to the bedroom, and I could feel the power radiating from him in waves. Something beyond werewolf, something ancient and primal and absolutely intoxicating. He laid me down on the bed with surprising gentleness, his hands careful despite the obvious strain of holding back. "Last chance to change your mind," he said, his voice rough with need. Instead of answering, I reached for the hem of my sweater and pulled it over my head in one smooth motion. Damien's eyes flared with silver light, and I could see his beast rising to the surface, could feel the power building between us. "Mine," he growled, and the possessive claim sent heat racing through my veins like liquid fire. "Prove it," I challenged, emboldened by desire and the certainty of our bond. Damien's laugh was dark, promising, full of wicked intent. "Gladly." What followed was unlike anything I'd ever experienced with Marcus or imagined in my wildest dreams. Damien worshipped my body with a reverence that made me feel like a goddess. But there was something wild and untamed in his touch that spoke to the deepest parts of my soul, awakened parts of myself I'd never known existed. When he finally claimed me completely, the mate bond snapped into place with a force that stole my breath and rewrote my understanding of reality. But it was more than just a werewolf-mate bond. I could feel something else flowing between us, ancient power, wild magic, a connection that went deeper than anything I'd ever imagined possible. It was as if Damien was sharing not just his body and his heart, but his very essence, the core of what made him unique. And somehow, impossibly, I found myself changing to meet him, rising to match his power. Strength flooded through my limbs, transforming me. My senses sharpened to inhuman levels beyond even normal werewolf perception. And Celeste's presence in my mind became stronger, more defined, more real than ever before. But underneath it all was something new, something I'd never experienced. A power that felt like moonlight and shadow combined, wild hunt and sacred grove merged into one, ancient magic long forgotten. What's happening to me? I gasped, clinging to Damien as waves of transformation rolled through me like an endless tide. You're becoming who you were always meant to be, Damien said, his voice rough with emotion and satisfaction. My mate, my queen, my equal in all things. The transformation reached its peak, and I felt something fundamental shift inside me, changing me on a cellular level. When it was over, I was still myself, still Elena, but more, stronger, faster, more connected to the wild magic that flowed through Damien's territory like invisible rivers. How do you feel? Damien asked, genuine concern clear in his voice despite our intimate position. I took inventory of my body, marveling at the changes, cataloging each new sensation. My vision was sharper, colors more vivid, able to see details in the shadows that had been invisible before. My hearing was more acute, picking up the individual heartbeats of small animals in the forest outside, the rustle of specific leaves. I could smell things I'd never noticed before. The age of the wood around us, the specific scents of different birds in the trees outside, the complex layers of Damien's own scent that spoke of power and protection and home. Different, I said finally, searching for words adequate to describe the transformation. But good different, like I'm finally complete, finally whole. Damien's smile was radiant, transforming his usually serious face. The mate bond, it's not just about joining two people. For my kind, it's about creating something new, something stronger than either person could be alone. Your kind? I asked, curiosity overcoming postcoital languor. Damien was quiet for a moment, and I could see him choosing his words carefully, measuring what to reveal. My father's line carries the blood of the old gods, Elena. The first shifters, the ones who ruled the wild places before humans ever learned to fear the dark. That power has been dormant in me for years, he continued, his voice thoughtful. But finding my true mate, completing the bond, it's awakened things I thought were lost forever. And now I have that power too, I realized, feeling it flowing through me like electricity. Some of it, Damien confirmed, pulling me closer. Enough to stand beside me as an equal. Enough to help me protect this territory and the wolves who depend on us for safety. The mention of other wolves surprised me, making me sit up slightly. There are others? Damien nodded, his expression becoming serious. Not a pack in the traditional sense, but wolves who've been cast out or rejected by their packs. Rogues who want a chance at redemption instead of just survival. This territory is a sanctuary for those who have nowhere else to go. The revelation changed everything, reshaping my understanding of the Shadow King. Damien wasn't just the feared alpha of legend. He was a protector, a leader of the lost and forgotten, a beacon of hope for the hopeless. I want to meet them, I said, feeling a pull toward this community I hadn't known existed. Tomorrow, Damien promised, pulling me back down beside him. Tonight you're mine. As we lay together in the aftermath of our claiming, wrapped in each other and the mate bond, I felt a peace I'd never known before. The bond hummed between us, stronger and more complex than anything I could have imagined, binding us together in ways that transcended simple romance. Whatever challenges lay ahead, and I had no doubt there would be many, I would face them with Damien at my side, my true mate, my equal, my home. But as I drifted off to sleep in his arms, I couldn't shake the memory of Marcus's parting words. He'd promised this wasn't over, and something told me he was the type of man who kept his promises, especially the threatening ones. The Shadow King had claimed me, but the war for my freedom was just beginning. And somehow, I knew that the mate bond we'd formed was about to be tested in ways neither of us could predict. The morning sun streaming through the windows woke me gently, and for a moment I simply lay there, marveling at how different everything felt. The mate bond thrummed between Damien and me like a living thing, and I could sense him even before I opened my eyes. Feel his contentment, his satisfaction, his fierce protectiveness. "Good morning," Damien said, his voice warm and rough from sleep. I opened my eyes to find him propped up on one elbow, watching me with those intense silver eyes that no longer frightened me. "Good morning. How do you feel?" he asked, reaching out to trace gentle patterns on my bare shoulder. "Amazing," I admitted, and it was true. Despite everything I'd been through, despite the upheaval of my entire life, I felt more centered and strong than I ever had in Moonhaven. "The bond, I can feel you. Your emotions, your presence. Is that normal?" "For true mates, yes," Damien confirmed. "It will become easier to control with time, to filter what you're feeling from me and what's yours alone. But there will always be a connection." A knock on the door interrupted our morning, followed by a woman's voice I didn't recognize. "Alpha Damien? I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have visitors. Multiple delegations from nearby territories." Damien's expression shifted immediately to one of concern. "How many?" "5 so far, with more arriving. Word has spread about yesterday's confrontation with Moonhaven Pack. They want to know if the rumors are true." "What rumors?" I asked as Damien began pulling on clothes with efficient movements. "That I've taken a mate," he replied. "That's extremely rare for alphas like me. Most assume I'm too dangerous, too different, to ever form a true mate bond. The implications of that hit me like a wave. By claiming me, by forming this bond, Damien had revealed something about himself that he'd kept hidden, had exposed a vulnerability. "I'm sorry," I said, feeling guilty. "I didn't mean to." "Don't," Damien interrupted firmly, turning to look at me with fierce intensity. "Don't apologize for being mine. This changes things, yes, but not in the way you're thinking." He crossed the room and cupped my face gently. For years, other packs have feared me, but also dismissed me as an aberration, something outside the normal order. But a mated alpha with a Luna? That's the foundation of pack structure. That makes me legitimate in their eyes, someone they have to deal with as an equal. "So this is political," I said, trying to understand the complex web of werewolf society. "Everything is political," Damien replied with a wry smile. "But it's also real. What we have is real, Elena. Never doubt that." I dressed quickly in clothes from the closet, no longer feeling strange about wearing garments that had belonged to someone else. They were mine now, part of my new life. When we descended to the main floor of the treehouse, I was surprised by what I found waiting. The clearing below was filled with wolves. Not in aggressive formations like Marcus's hunting party, but in respectful groups, clearly here to parley. "Alpha Damien." One of the wolves stepped forward, a woman in her 50s with gray-streaked hair and the bearing of leadership. "I am Catherine Riversong, Alpha of the Clearwater Pack. We've heard rumors of your mating, and we've come to offer congratulations. And to see if it's true," another Alpha added, this one a younger man. "The Shadow King with a mate. It changes the balance of power in the region." Damien's hand found mine, and I felt strength flowing through our bond. "It's true. This is Elena, my mate, and Luna." The gathered wolves studied me with open curiosity, and I could feel their assessment like physical weight. Some looked skeptical, others intrigued, still others calculating how this development affected their own territories. "A refugee from Moonhaven," Alpha Catherine observed, not unkindly. "Marcus Blackwood's rejected mate, if the stories are accurate." "I was never Marcus's mate," I said clearly, finding my voice and my strength. "That was a lie he perpetuated for political gain. But I am Damien's mate, truly and completely." "Can you prove it?" the younger Alpha challenged. "Forgive my skepticism, but in our world, claims of mate bonds are often convenient fictions." Damien tensed beside me, clearly prepared to defend me, but I squeezed his hand gently. This was my challenge to answer, my legitimacy to prove. "How would you have me prove it?" I asked calmly. "Show us your mark," Alpha Catherine suggested. "True mate bonds leave unique marks that can't be faked." I glanced at Damien, who nodded permission. Pulling aside the collar of my shirt, I revealed the mark Damien had left on my neck during our claiming. An intricate pattern of silver and shadow that seemed to shift and move like living art. The gathered alphas gasped collectively, and I saw genuine shock on their faces. "It's a true bond mark," Catherine breathed. "I haven't seen one in decades." "And more than that," the younger alpha added, his skepticism replaced by awe. "Look at the pattern. That's not just a mate bond. That's a true pair, Mark. What's a true pair? I asked, sensing this was significant. Mates whose powers complement and enhance each other, Catherine explained, her eyes bright with interest. It's said that true pairs haven't existed for over 1,000 years, not since the great wars between the old ones. This changes everything, another alpha murmured, and I could see the calculations happening behind multiple sets of eyes. Why? I asked, still trying to understand the implications. Because true pairs are more than just mates, Catherine said. According to legend, they can share power, enhance their pack's abilities, even influence the bonds of other mated pairs. They're symbols of hope and unity. They're also targets, the younger alpha said grimly. The council won't like this. True pairs threaten their authority, their control over how packs operate. Let them come, Damien said, his voice carrying absolute confidence. Elena is under my protection, and anyone who threatens her threatens me. The gathered alphas exchanged glances, clearly reassessing their positions, recalculating political alliances in light of this new information. Alpha Damien, Catherine said formally. Clearwater Pack would like to offer an alliance. If the council moves against you, they move against us as well. Riverbend Pack stands with you, another alpha added. One by one, the other delegations offered their support, until 5 of the 7 packs present had pledged alliance. Only 2 remained neutral, unwilling to commit, but also unwilling to oppose us. As the delegations began to depart, Catherine approached us privately. A word of warning, she said quietly. The council has enforcers who specialize in dealing with threats to their authority. If they see you as a threat, they won't just send warriors. They'll send hunters. Hunters? I asked, the term unfamiliar. Council assassins, Damien explained grimly. Part werewolf, part something else. Created specifically to kill alphas and other powerful wolves. Catherine nodded. Be careful. Your mate bond is beautiful, but it's also painted a target on both of you. The council doesn't tolerate power they can't control. After she left, Damien and I stood in the clearing, processing everything that had just happened. In less than 24 hours, I'd gone from a runaway bride to the Luna of a sanctuary to one half of a legendary true pair that apparently threatened the entire power structure of werewolf society. Are you sorry? Damien asked quietly. That being with me has made you a target? I turned to face him, taking both his hands in mine. Never, I said firmly. Whatever comes, we'll face it together. Damien pulled me close, and I felt the mate bond pulse between us, strong and unbreakable. But even as I stood in his arms, I couldn't shake Catherine's warning about hunters and the council's wrath. Our peaceful morning had just revealed that our mate bond wasn't just personal. It was political, powerful, and dangerous. And somewhere I knew, the council was already planning how to eliminate the threat we represented. The real battle was still to come. And this time, it wouldn't just be about my freedom. It would be about the future of every wolf who'd ever dared to dream of something better than the rigid hierarchy of traditional pack structure. The war was coming, and we'd better be ready. Where love and choice triumph over fear and control, setting the stage for future generations to grow up in a world fundamentally different from the one they inherited. Asterisk. 3 weeks after the delegations had visited, I stood in what had become our community center, a large clearing where wolves from our growing sanctuary gathered for meals, meetings, and celebrations. The transformation of my life continued to amaze me daily. Luna Elena, a young woman, approached me nervously, a toddler balanced on her hip. I'm Sarah, my daughter Lily, and I came here 6 months ago. The pack that cast us out said a child with no father wasn't worth feeding. The casual cruelty of it made my stomach turn. How could they? Because pack law says unmated females with children are burdens, Sarah replied matter-of-factly, though I could hear the old pain in her voice. Damien says different laws apply here. What laws? I asked, genuinely curious about how our sanctuary operated. Simple ones, a new voice said. I turned to find an elderly woman approaching, her silver hair gleaming in the afternoon light. Everyone contributes what they can. Everyone protects what matters. Everyone gets fed. Everyone gets shelter. Everyone gets protection. No exceptions. I'm Elena, I said, extending my hand. I know who you are, Luna, the woman replied with a slight smile. I'm Margaret. I speak for the older members of our community. We were wondering when you'd finally come down from that treehouse and meet your people. There was no malice in her words, just gentle teasing, and I found myself laughing. "You're right. I should have come sooner. You needed time to adjust," Margaret said kindly. "Becoming a true pair mate isn't easy, especially when you're recovering from betrayal. But you're here now, and that's what matters." Over the next few hours, I met dozens of wolves who called Shadowmere home. There was Thomas, a teenage boy who'd been exiled for challenging his alpha's decision to abandon an injured pack mate. Maria, a healer who'd been cast out for treating rogues. David, an older wolf who'd lost his mate and been deemed useless by his former pack. Each story was unique, but they all shared common threads: rejection, abandonment, and finding hope in Damien's sanctuary. By the time the sun began to set, I understood something fundamental about what we'd built here. This wasn't just a haven for outcasts. It was a revolution in the making, a living proof that there was another way to structure werewolf society. "You're thinking deep thoughts," Damien said, appearing beside me with the silent grace that still made my heart skip. "I'm thinking about responsibility," I replied, leaning into him. "All these wolves, they're depending on us." "They're depending on the dream we represent," Damien corrected. "That's different." "Is it?" I asked. "If we fail, if the council destroys us, then we'll have shown it was possible, even if only for a little while," Damien said firmly. "But we're not going to fail, Elena. Not while we stand together." A commotion at the edge of the clearing interrupted our conversation. One of our scouts came running, his face pale with urgency. "Alpha, Luna, there's someone at the border. She says she's from the Oracle Council, and she needs to speak with you immediately." Damien and I exchanged glances. The Oracle Council was separate from the ruling council, a group of ancient seers who supposedly advised on matters of prophecy and destiny. They rarely involved themselves in political affairs. "Bring her in," Damien ordered. "But keep guards posted." Minutes later, a figure emerged from the forest. A woman who appeared to be in her 40s, but moved with an agelessness that suggested she was far older. Her hair was stark white, her eyes a pale blue that seemed to look through rather than at you. "Alpha Damien. Luna Elena," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that made my wolf sit up and take notice. "I am Seraphina Night Whisper, Oracle of the Moon Goddess. I've come to deliver a warning and a prophecy." "What kind of warning?" Damien asked, immediately on guard. "The council knows about your true pair bond," Seraphina said without preamble. "They've sent their hunters. 3 of them, the most skilled assassins they possess. They'll be here within the week." My blood ran cold. Catherine had warned us about hunters, but I'd hoped we'd have more time to prepare. "And the prophecy?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Seraphina's eyes focused on me with unsettling intensity. "It concerns you specifically, Luna Elena. May I approach?" Damien tensed beside me, but I nodded permission. Seraphina moved closer, studying me with those ancient eyes. "You're more than you appear," she said finally. "The blood of the moon's daughters runs in your veins, a bloodline thought extinct for 500 years. "Moon's daughters," I repeated. "The first female alphas," Seraphina explained. "Women who could lead packs without male counterparts, who drew their power directly from the moon goddess herself. Your mother's line carried that blood, diluted over generations, but never completely lost." I thought of my mother, her quiet strength, the way she'd always seemed more than she appeared. "She never told me." "She may not have known," Seraphina said. "The trait only awakens in the presence of a true mate who can match and enhance that power, which is why you're so dangerous to the council." "Why dangerous?" Damien asked, his protective instincts clearly triggered. "Because together, you represent everything they fear," Seraphina said, turning to address us both. "A mated pair who can lead without dominance, who can inspire loyalty through love rather than fear. You're living proof that their system is unnecessary, that there are better ways to organize werewolf society." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice took on the cadence of formal prophecy. "When shadow finds moonlight in the darkest hour, when the rejected claims her rightful power, when ancient blood wakes to ancient call, the old order trembles, the new one will rise or fall. 3 trials await the true bonded pair, 3 hunters come with death to bear, but if they stand where 2 hearts beat as one, the age of choice begins, the age of force is done. Yet beware the cost of victory's crown, for what is built can still fall down, and only sacrifice freely given can forge the bridge to a world forgiven." The prophecy hung in the air like smoke, heavy with implications I was only beginning to understand. 3 trials, I said quietly. The 3 hunters. Serafina nodded. Each hunter is designed to test a different aspect of your bond. The first will test your individual strength. The second will test your unity. The third will test your willingness to sacrifice for others. What happens if we fail? Damien asked grimly. If you fail the first, you die, Serafina said bluntly. If you fail the second, your bond breaks and you become vulnerable to the Council's control. If you fail the third, the prophecy doesn't say, but I suspect it means the old order continues unchallenged. No pressure then, I muttered, trying to process this avalanche of information. Serafina's expression softened slightly. You're stronger than you know, Luna Elena. Both of you are. The moon goddess doesn't create true pairs by accident. You were made for this, even if you don't feel ready. After Serafina left with promises to return if she learned more, Damien and I called an emergency council meeting with our most trusted wolves. Margaret, Sarah, Thomas, David, and a few others who'd become informal leaders within our sanctuary. The council's sending hunters, Damien said without preamble. We have less than a week to prepare. What are our options? Margaret asked, her tactical mind already working. We could run, David suggested. Scatter to the winds, make it harder for them to find us all. No, I said firmly, surprising myself with the vehemence. If we run now, we'll always be running. This ends here, one way or another. Elena's right, Damien agreed. Besides, running just delays the inevitable. The council won't stop with us. They'll hunt down every wolf who believed in what we're building. Then we fight, Thomas said, his young voice filled with determination. We've all found home here. It's worth fighting for. Sarah spoke up, her voice soft but steady. I can't fight. I need to protect Lily. But I can help with medical preparations, evacuation plans for the non-combatants. Everyone contributes what they can, Margaret quoted our founding principle. We'll need fortifications, weapons, strategy. The hunters will be expecting disorganized rogues. Let's show them what a community can do when they fight for something they believe in. Over the next 6 days, our sanctuary transformed into a fortress. Thomas, who'd revealed extensive knowledge of military tactics from growing up in a border pack, worked with Damien to plan defensive strategies. Margaret organized the older wolves into support roles. Medical stations, supply management, evacuation routes for the children if everything went wrong. And I trained. Damien pushed me harder than I'd ever been pushed, helping me understand and control the powers that came with my awakened bloodline. I learned to sense other wolves' emotions, to project calm or confidence when needed, to enhance the abilities of those around me through the mate bond one shared with Damien. You're a force multiplier, Damien explained during one training session. Where I bring raw power, you bring coordination and enhancement. Together, we can make our whole community stronger than the sum of its parts. How? I asked, fascinated by these abilities I'd never known I possessed. The true pair bond, he said. It's not just about us. It creates a resonance that affects every wolf who swears loyalty to us. They become part of something larger, connected in ways normal packs can't achieve. I thought about the wolves I'd met, how they'd all mentioned feeling a sense of belonging here that went beyond simple safety. Like a pack bond, but voluntary? Exactly, Damien confirmed. Traditional pack bonds are forced through alpha dominance. Ours is offered and accepted freely. It's weaker in some ways. I can't command them absolutely. But it's stronger in others. They fight harder because they choose to, not because they must. On the 7th day, the hunters arrived. They came at dawn, 3 figures emerging from the mist like nightmares made flesh. I could see immediately that they weren't entirely werewolf. There was something else in their scent, something that made my newly awakened instincts scream warnings. The first hunter was massive, easily 7 feet tall, with skin that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. He carried no weapons I could see, but his hands ended in claws that looked like they could tear through steel. The second was smaller, faster, moving with a grace that was almost hypnotic. I thought it was a she, carried twin blades that gleamed with silver and something darker. The third was the most disturbing. Average height, unremarkable features, but his eyes were completely black. No white, no iris, just endless darkness that seemed to pull at your soul when you looked at them. Alpha Damien, the massive one, spoke, his voice like grinding stones. Luna Elena. I am Cain. These are my companions, Shade and Void. The council has sent us to offer you a choice. We're not interested in the council's offers, Damien replied, his power radiating outward in waves. Hear us out, Cain said, holding up a massive hand. The council is willing to grant you official recognition of your sanctuary. You can keep your wolves, your territory, your ways. All you have to do is submit to council authority and cease recruiting from other packs. And if we refuse? I asked, already knowing the answer. Then we execute you for rebellion, Shade said, her voice like silk over steel. And your wolves are distributed among traditional packs for rehabilitation. Slavery, you mean? Margaret called out from behind us. Our entire community had gathered, standing together, presenting a united front. Semantics, Void said, his black eyes fixed on me. The council offers peace. Refuse, and we bring war. I looked at Damien, feeling our bond pulse with shared determination. We didn't need words. We both knew what came next. We refuse, Damien said clearly. This sanctuary remains free, and will continue to offer home to any wolf who needs it. Cain sighed, almost regretfully. So be it. The first trial begins now. He moved with impossible speed, closing the distance between us in a heartbeat. His first strike was aimed at me. Testing my individual strength, I realized, remembering Seraphina's prophecy. But I was ready. The power that had been dormant in my bloodline surged to the surface, and I met Cain's charge with my own speed that surprised even me. Our clash sent shockwaves through the clearing, leaves exploding from nearby trees. Impressive, Cain said, genuine surprise in his voice. The rumors of Moon's daughter blood were true. We traded blows at a pace that left the watching wolves gasping. Cain was stronger, more experienced, enhanced by whatever the council had done to create him. But I had something he didn't. I was fighting for home, for family, for wolves who believed in me. And I had Damien's power flowing through our mate bond, enhancing my strength, sharpening my reflexes. The fight lasted what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. When it ended, Cain lay on his back, my clawed hand at his throat, both of us heaving with exertion. The first trial is complete, he said, and there was approval in his voice. You are stronger than expected, Luna Elena. The second trial, Shade announced, stepping forward. Unity. This time, both hunters attacked at once. Shade and Void moving in perfect synchronization, forcing Damien and me to fight as a pair. It was the ultimate test of our bond, requiring us to anticipate each other's moves, to cover each other's weaknesses, to function as a single unit. The mate bond proved its worth. Damien and I moved together as if we'd been training for years rather than weeks. Where one of us was pressured, the other provided support. Where one saw an opening, the other created the opportunity to exploit it. Shade's blades were deadly, and Void's dark energy drained strength wherever it touched. But together, Damien and I were more than the sum of our parts. Shadow and moonlight, power and grace, strength and strategy. We complemented each other perfectly. When Shade and Void finally yielded, both wounded but alive, I understood something profound. The mate bond wasn't just about love or partnership. It was about becoming something greater together than either could be alone. The second trial is complete, Void said, his black eyes showing something that might have been respect. Your unity is genuine. Which brings us to the final trial, Cain said, rising to his feet despite his injuries. Sacrifice. What do you mean? Damien demanded, immediately suspicious. Simple, Cain replied. You can have your sanctuary, your freedom, your wolves. But one of you must come with us to the council, to ensure the other's continued cooperation. The trap was elegant in its cruelty. We could have everything we wanted, except each other. The council was betting that we'd choose our bond over our cause, or that the forced separation would eventually poison what we'd built. No, I said immediately, even as Damien said the same. Then we kill everyone, Shade said simply. Every wolf in this clearing. We'll make it quick, at least. I looked around at the faces of our community. Sarah holding little Lily close. Margaret standing tall despite her age. Thomas with his hand on a makeshift weapon. David beside him. Dozens of wolves who'd found hope here, who believed in what we represented. I'll go, I said, stepping forward before Damien could stop me. Elena, no. Damien's protest was immediate, his power flaring. I turned to face him, taking his hands in mine. Listen to me. You can hold this place together without me. You did it for years before I came. But I can't do what you do. These wolves need you. I need you, Damien said, his voice breaking with emotion I'd never heard before. And I need you to protect them, I replied, tears streaming down my face. This is my choice, Damien. Let me make it. Through our bond, I felt his anguish, his fury, his desperate need to refuse. But I also felt his understanding. He knew I was right, even though it was tearing him apart. The prophecy, he whispered. Sacrifice freely given. I nodded. This is what it meant. This is how we forge the bridge to a better world. Damien pulled me into a fierce embrace, and I felt our bond pulse with something beyond love. A connection that would endure no matter the distance, no matter the separation. I will find a way to get you back, he promised against my hair. I swear it on everything I am. I know, I said, believing it absolutely. Just keep them safe. Keep our dream alive. As I walked toward the hunters, I heard the wolves of our sanctuary begin to howl. Not in grief, but in solidarity. They understood what I was doing and why. I wasn't just their Luna. I was living proof that sometimes love meant letting go. Interesting choice, Kane said as I reached them. The council expected the Alpha to offer himself. The council doesn't understand what we've built, I replied, lifting my chin. They never will. As the hunters led me away from Shadowmere, away from Damien and the home we'd created, I felt our mate bond stretch but not break. It remained strong, a tether connecting us across whatever distance the council created. I'd made my sacrifice. Now it was time to see what would come of it. Behind me, Damien's howl of rage and grief echoed through the forest, answered by dozens of voices. The revolution we'd started wasn't over. If anything, it was just beginning. And somehow, I knew that my time with the council would reveal truths that would change everything. The third trial wasn't just about sacrifice. It was about transformation. The age of choice had begun, just as the prophecy promised. And I would play my part, no matter the cost. The council's fortress was nothing like I'd imagined. Instead of the grand, intimidating structure I'd expected, it was cold and clinical. All steel and glass and artificial light that never quite felt like sunlight. They kept me in what they called guest quarters. But I knew a prison when I saw one, no matter how luxurious the furnishings. For the first 3 days, they left me alone. No interrogations, no threats, just isolation and the constant ache of separation from Damien. Our mate bond stretched across the distance like a lifeline, and I clung to it desperately. Through it, I could feel his determination, his planning, his refusal to accept this arrangement as permanent. On the 4th day, they came for me. Luna Elena, a woman in council robes, said as she entered my quarters. She was middle-aged, with sharp eyes and an air of authority. I am Counselor Victoria Ashford. The High Council requests your presence. I followed her through corridors that all looked the same. Sterile, empty, devoid of the natural beauty that characterized Shadowmere. Eventually, we reached a circular chamber where 7 figures sat in high-backed chairs arranged in a semicircle. Elena Rivers, the central figure, spoke. He was ancient, his face lined with centuries of life, his eyes cold as winter ice. I am High Counselor Nathaniel Frost. You've caused us considerable trouble. I didn't ask to be a true pair, I replied, keeping my voice steady despite my fear. No, but you've embraced it, another counselor said, a woman with silver streaks in her dark hair. You've encouraged rebellion against the established order. Wolves are questioning their alphas. Packs are fracturing. This is your doing. This is the result of your doing, I countered, finding courage I didn't know I possessed. You've created a system so rigid, so cruel, that wolves would rather risk death than continue living under it. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed dangerously. Bold words from a prisoner. I'm not a prisoner, I said, lifting my chin. I'm a volunteer. There's a difference. Is there? He gestured, and images appeared on screens around the chamber. Surveillance footage of Shadowmere. I watched Damien organizing defenses, wolves training together, children playing under Margaret's watchful eye. We could destroy everything you've built with a single command. The only reason we haven't is because you're here. The threat was clear, but so was something else. They were afraid. Truly afraid of what Damien and I represented. Why? I asked suddenly. Why are you so threatened by wolves choosing their own path? Because choice is chaos, Victoria said firmly. The pack system has kept our kind safe for millennia. Hierarchy, order, clear lines of authority. These things prevent the wars that nearly destroyed us. They also prevent growth, I replied. Evolution. Change. You've built a system that protects the powerful and abandons everyone else. And your system? Nathaniel challenged. This sanctuary of rogues and outcasts? How long do you think that will last? Without structure, without discipline, it will collapse into anarchy. You're wrong, I said with absolute certainty. We have structure. It's just not based on fear and domination. We have discipline, but it comes from commitment to shared values, not forced submission. The counselors exchanged glances, clearly not used to being challenged so directly. Let me show you something, Nathaniel said, and the screens changed to show different scenes. Packs in chaos, alphas being challenged, territories in dispute. This is what your revolution has wrought. Instability. Conflict. Wolves dying because they no longer respect the old ways. I watched the images, feeling sick. Had our actions really caused this? But then I looked closer, examined the details, and saw the truth. Those aren't new conflicts, I said slowly. Those are old problems finally coming to light. Abusive alphas being held accountable. Unjust hierarchies being questioned. You're not showing me the cost of change. You're showing me the cost of your system finally being exposed for what it is. Nathaniel's face darkened with fury. You understand nothing, girl. We've maintained peace for centuries. You've maintained control, I interrupted. There's a difference. Peace built on oppression isn't real peace. It's just waiting for the explosion. Enough, Nathaniel commanded, his alpha power rolling out in waves. But it barely touched me. The true pair bond and my awakened bloodline protected me from forced submission. His eyes widened in shock. Impossible. Even here, even separated from your mate. The bond doesn't break just because you separate us physically, I said, understanding dawning. That's what terrifies you, isn't it? You can't control us the way you control other wolves. Can't force us to submit. Can't break what we've built. Victoria stood abruptly. This interview is over. Return her to her quarters. As they led me away, I caught sight of a young wolf in council robes watching from the shadows. Barely more than a teenager, with eyes that held sympathy rather than hostility. Our gazes met for just a moment, but it was enough. Not everyone in the council's ranks believed in their methods. Back in my quarters, I pressed my hand against the window and reached through the mate bond. Damien, I thought, sending love and reassurance across the distance. I'm okay. I'm learning things. Trust me. His response came immediately, warm and fierce, always. We're coming for you. Hold on. But I wasn't sure I wanted to be rescued. Not yet. The council had made a critical mistake by bringing me here. They'd given me access to the heart of their operation, shown me their fears and weaknesses. And I was beginning to form a plan. The next morning, the young wolf I'd seen the previous day appeared at my door with breakfast. I'm Adrian, he said quietly, glancing over his shoulder nervously. I'm not supposed to talk to you, but... He hesitated, then pushed forward. Is it true? What they say about Shadowmere? That wolves live there without fear. It's true, I said gently, gesturing for him to sit. Tell me your story, Adrian. What poured out over the next hour broke my heart. Adrian had been recruited into council service at age 12, taken from his family and trained as an enforcer. He'd spent 6 years following orders, doing things that haunted him, all because he'd been told it was necessary for the greater good. But watching you yesterday, he said, the way you stood up to them without fear, I've never seen anyone do that. And I started wondering, what if everything they've taught me is wrong? Not everything, I said carefully. Structure isn't inherently bad. Leadership isn't inherently bad, but it should serve the people, not control them. It should protect the vulnerable, not exploit them. Adrian's eyes filled with tears. I've done terrible things, Luna Elena. Things I can't take back. Then do better going forward, I replied, taking his hand. That's all any of us can do. Learn from our mistakes and choose differently next time. He left looking thoughtful, and I knew I'd planted a seed. How many other young wolves in the council's service felt the same way Adrian did? How many were questioning, doubting, looking for another path? Over the following weeks, I became a different kind of revolutionary. Not through violence or confrontation, but through conversation. Adrian brought others to meet me, always carefully, always in secret. Young wolves who'd been recruited or born into council service, who'd never known there was another way to live. I told them about Shadowmere, about wolves who chose their own paths, about children who grew up believing they could be anything. I shared stories of Margaret's wisdom, Thomas's courage, Sarah's determination to build a better life for her daughter. And slowly, carefully, resistance began to grow within the council's own ranks. Meanwhile, through the mate bond, I coordinated with Damien. He was building something too, a coalition of progressive packs who were tired of the council's control. Catherine from Clearwater Pack had become one of our strongest allies, using her political influence to sway other alphas. But the council wasn't blind to what was happening. On a cold morning in my 8th week of captivity, Nathaniel himself came to my quarters, his expression grave. "You've been busy, Elena Rivers," he said without preamble. "Did you think we wouldn't notice young Adrian's sudden questioning of authority? Or the whispered conversations among our junior enforcers?" My heart sank, but I kept my face neutral. "I've simply been answering questions honestly." "You've been spreading sedition," Nathaniel corrected coldly. "And now you'll see the consequences." He gestured, and guards brought in Adrian, bruised, bloodied, clearly beaten. "No." I lunged forward, but more guards held me back. "This is what happens to those who question the council," Nathaniel said, his voice carrying throughout the room. "This is the price of rebellion." But then something unexpected happened. The guards holding Adrian hesitated, exchanging glances. One of them, a woman in her 30s, spoke up. "High Counselor, with respect, this isn't justice. Adrian only asked questions. That shouldn't be a crime." Nathaniel spun toward her, fury radiating from him. "You dare question me?" "I dare question this," she replied, her voice growing stronger. "We all do. Elena Rivers hasn't done anything except show us kindness and speak truth. If that's sedition, then maybe we're serving the wrong cause." Other guards murmured agreement. I watched in amazement as the rebellion I'd seeded began to bloom right in front of the High Counselor. Enough! Nathaniel's alpha power exploded outward, forcing everyone to their knees. Everyone except me, protected by my true pair bond and Moon's daughter bloodline. "You see," I said quietly, standing alone while others knelt. "This is why your system is failing. Power based on force only works until people stop being afraid. And we're not afraid anymore." Nathaniel stared at me with something approaching respect mixed with hatred. "You're more dangerous than I thought." "I'm not dangerous," I replied. "I'm just free. And freedom is contagious." That night, everything changed. Adrian and 6 other young wolves helped me escape, but I didn't run for the border. Instead, I headed deeper into the council fortress, toward the archives that Victoria had mentioned. Records of every decision, every law, every crime the council had committed in the name of order. "Are you insane?" Adrian hissed as we crept through darkened corridors. "We need to get you out." "Not yet," I said firmly. "First, we need proof. Evidence of everything they've done. The packs need to see the truth." We found the archives guarded by only 2 enforcers. Older wolves who looked surprised when Adrian and the others appeared. "Stand aside," Adrian said, his voice carrying new authority. "By order of our consciences." The guards looked at each other, then at us, then at the archive doors. Finally, one of them stepped aside. "We've been waiting a long time for someone brave enough to look," she said quietly. "What we found in those archives was damning beyond my worst nightmares. Records of murders disguised as accidents. Political opponents eliminated. Packs destroyed for daring to question council authority. Children taken from their families for training that was barely distinguishable from brainwashing. But we also found something else. Evidence that the council itself was fracturing. Internal memos showing that not all counselors agreed with Nathaniel's hardline approach. Secret communications between Victoria and several progressive alphas, including Catherine. She's been working against them from the inside. I breathed, suddenly understanding. Victoria brought me here hoping I'd do exactly what I've done. "Then we need to get this information out," one of Adrian's companions said. "But how?" "They monitor all communications." Through the mate bond, I felt Damien suddenly surge with alertness. "Elena, what's happening?" I focused, sending him images through our connection, something I'd been practicing in secret for weeks. The archives, the evidence, the need for extraction. His response was immediate and fierce. "Tonight. Be ready." The attack on the council fortress came at midnight, but it wasn't the violent assault I'd expected. Instead, Damien brought an army of witnesses. Alphas from over 30 packs, neutral observers, even representatives from the human government that werewolves technically operated under. "We demand a formal inquiry into council operations," Catherine's voice rang out, amplified by speakers. We demand transparency, accountability, and the immediate release of Elena Rivers, who was taken without proper authority. Inside the fortress, alarms blared. Nathaniel appeared on the ramparts, flanked by his loyal enforcers. "This is an act of war," he declared. "No," Damien's voice responded, equally amplified. "This is an act of justice. You've ruled through fear and secrecy for too long. Today that ends." "You can't possibly win," Nathaniel said, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. "Even with your coalition, you don't have the numbers." "We don't need numbers," I said, stepping out onto a balcony where everyone could see me, Adrian, and the others at my side. "We have the truth." I held up data drives containing copies of everything we'd found, centuries of the Council's crimes, exposed for all to see. "Your own people helped me get this," I continued, my voice carrying across the assembled crowd. "Because they know right from wrong. Because they're tired of serving a system built on oppression. This isn't rebellion. This is liberation." For a long moment, silence reigned. Then Victoria stepped forward, standing beside me instead of beside Nathaniel. "She's right," Victoria said clearly. "I've been gathering evidence for years, waiting for the right moment. Elena gave us that moment. The Council as it exists must end. What we build in its place should serve wolves, not rule them." One by one, other counselors defected, until only Nathaniel and 2 loyalists remained isolated. "This is treason," Nathaniel snarled, but his power was broken. Without the unified front of the Council, without the fear that had sustained their authority, he was just one old wolf trying to hold back the tide of change. "This is evolution," Damien replied, climbing to join me on the balcony. The moment he reached me, our mate bond surged with reunion, and I felt whole again for the first time in weeks. "And you can either evolve with us or be left behind." The standoff lasted another hour, but the outcome was inevitable. When Nathaniel finally surrendered, it was with the understanding that his era had ended. The trials that followed were unprecedented in werewolf history. Every decision the Council had made was examined, debated, judged by a new assembly of alphas and pack representatives. Some counselors were exonerated, having tried to work within the system to change it. Others, like Nathaniel, faced consequences for their crimes. But more important than punishment was reconstruction. Over the following months, a new system emerged. Not the tyranny of the old Council, but not the complete autonomy that some feared would lead to chaos. Instead, we created something in between, a federation of independent packs with shared values and mutual support. The Accords of Free Association, they called it. Each pack maintained sovereignty but agreed to basic principles. No forced matings, no punishment without trial, no discrimination based on status or birth. Disputes would be mediated by neutral parties. Resources would be shared in times of need. And most importantly, any wolf could seek sanctuary if their pack violated these principles. Shadowmere became the model, but dozens of other sanctuaries sprang up across the continent. The revolution we'd started had become a transformation that touched every wolf in North America. 3 months after the Council's fall, Damien and I stood on the platform at Shadowmere, looking out over our community. It had grown. Wolves who'd been trapped in oppressive packs had flocked to us, bringing their families, their skills, their hope. "Tired?" Damien asked, slipping his arm around my waist. "Exhausted," I admitted. "But happy." "We did it, Damien. We actually did it." "You did it," he corrected. "Your sacrifice, your courage in the Council fortress, that's what changed everything." "Our sacrifice," I replied, leaning into him. "Neither of us could have done this alone." Margaret approached, her expression pleased. "Luna, Elena, Alpha Damien, there's someone here to see you. She says it's important." Serafina emerged from the treeline, her ancient eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "The prophecy is complete," she announced. 3 trials passed. The age of choice has begun. The old order has fallen, and a new one rises in its place. "What now?" I asked. "The prophecy said something about sacrifice being freely given." "And it was," Serafina confirmed. "Your willingness to separate, to endure captivity for the greater good. That was the sacrifice. Not your death, but your comfort. Not your bond, but your togetherness. And because it was freely given, it had the power to transform everything." She paused, then smiled. "There's something else the prophecy foretold, but I didn't mention it before. Would you like to hear it?" Damien and I exchanged glances. Should we be worried? On the contrary, Serafina said, her smile widening. When shadow finds moonlight and trials are done, when sacrifice freely given has been won, new life will come to the bonded pair, hope made flesh for all to share. My hand went instinctively to my stomach, where I'd been feeling strange sensations for the past week. Are you saying? You're pregnant, Elena, Serafina confirmed. The first true pair child born in over 1,000 years. She'll be extraordinary. Damien's joy exploded through our bond, and he swept me into his arms, spinning me around while I laughed and cried simultaneously. A child, he breathed, setting me down gently as if I were made of glass. Our child. The future made manifest, Serafina said softly. She'll grow up in a world you created, knowing nothing of the old ways except as history. And she'll be just the first. Other true pairs will emerge now that the path has been cleared. Your daughter will have companions, friends, a generation that doesn't even understand why anyone would want to rule through fear. As Serafina departed with promises to return for the birth, Damien and I stood together, processing this new reality. We'd fought a revolution, toppled an ancient power structure, and created a new world. Now we'd bring new life into it. What should we name her? I asked, already certain Serafina was right about the gender. Something meaningful, Damien said thoughtfully. Something that represents everything we've fought for. Luna, I said suddenly, for the goddess who guided us. And Rose, for the hope that blooms even in darkness. Luna Rose Blackwood. Damien tested the name, and through our bond, I felt his approval. Perfect. Like her mother. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though not without surprises. Luna Rose made her presence known early, her power already manifesting even in the womb. When I walked through Shadowmere, wolves reported feeling calmer, stronger, more connected. Our daughter was already affecting those around her, already proving that true pair children were something special. Margaret took charge of preparations with the enthusiasm of a grandmother, enlisting Sarah and other mothers to help design a nursery, organize supplies, and plan for the first true pair birth in living memory. The excitement was infectious. Every wolf in Shadowmere felt invested in this child's arrival. She's going to be so loved, Sarah said one afternoon as we worked on decorating the nursery. Little Lily, now 3 years old, was enthusiastically helping by adding her own artistic touches to the walls. Not just by you and Damien, but by all of us. She'll have dozens of aunts and uncles, grandparents in spirit if not blood. That's what I want for her, I said, watching Lily's innocent joy. A community, not just a pack. People who choose to love her, not wolves bound by hierarchy. Thomas, now 17 and serving as one of Damien's primary lieutenants, poked his head in. Luna Elena, there are more delegations arriving. Word has spread about the baby, and alphas from the Pacific territories want to pay respects. The attention was overwhelming at times. Luna Rose wasn't even born yet, but she'd already become a symbol. Proof that the new way of life could produce not just survival but flourishing. Packs that had been skeptical of the Accords found it harder to argue against a system that produced such obvious blessings. Damien handled the political aspects with his usual skill, but I could feel his increasing protectiveness through our bond. As my due date approached, he barely let me out of his sight. I'm not fragile, I told him one evening, amused by his hovering. I know, he replied, his hand resting on my swollen belly where Luna Rose was currently doing what felt like acrobatics. But you're precious. Both of you are. The thought of anything happening. I silenced him with a kiss. Nothing's going to happen. We've survived war, revolution, and the Council's wrath. We can handle one tiny baby. Luna Rose chose that moment to kick particularly hard, making us both laugh. Maybe not so tiny, Damien amended. When labor began, it was the middle of the night during a full moon. Appropriately dramatic for a child of Moon's daughter bloodline. Damien helped me to the medical center that Lydia had established, where she and 2 other experienced midwives waited. How are you feeling? Lydia asked, checking my vitals with professional efficiency. Like I'm about to meet my daughter, I replied, managing a smile despite the contraction that gripped me. The labor was intense, but mercifully short for a first child. Luna Rose was eager to join the world, and within 4 hours, her first cry split the night air. But it wasn't just a cry. There was power in it, a resonance that made every wolf in Shadowmere stop what they were doing and listen. In that sound was promise, potential, and proof that a new age had truly begun. She's perfect, Lydia breathed, carefully cleaning our daughter before placing her in my arms. Luna Rose was indeed perfect. Thick dark hair like Damien's, but when she opened her eyes, they were already showing their true colors. One silver like mine, one dark like Damien's. Heterochromatic eyes that marked her as something unique even among true pair children. "Hello, little one," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "We've been waiting for you." Damien knelt beside the bed, his expression transformed by wonder and fierce paternal love. When Luna Rose's tiny hand wrapped around his finger, I felt his emotions surge through our bond. Pride, protectiveness, overwhelming love. "She's extraordinary," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "She's ours," I replied, and that was all that mattered. Word of Luna Rose's birth spread quickly. By morning, the clearing outside the medical center was filled with wolves wanting to welcome the first true pair child. Margaret organized them into orderly groups, ensuring we weren't overwhelmed, but allowing everyone to pay respects. "She's beautiful, Luna Elena," Adrian said when his turn came. He was barely recognizable from the frightened young wolf I'd met in the council fortress. Confidence and purpose had transformed him. "And she represents everything we fought for. She represents the future," I corrected gently. "Yours as much as hers. You helped make this world possible, Adrian. Never forget that." As visitors came and went, I noticed something remarkable. Luna Rose responded to each wolf differently, as if she could already sense their emotions and intentions. She cooed happily for Margaret, gripped Thomas's finger with surprising strength, and even made little Lily laugh by grabbing her nose. "She's already connecting with them," Damien observed. "Already building bonds." "She's already a Luna," I said, pride filling my voice. "Even at 1 day old." The first year of Luna Rose's life was one of wonder and exhaustion in equal measure. She was precocious in ways that constantly surprised us, babbling recognizable words by 4 months, taking her first steps at 8 months, and attempting to shift to wolf form at 10 months. "Is this normal?" I asked Lydia after witnessing Luna Rose briefly achieve a partial shift before reverting back in surprise. "Nothing about true pair children is normal," Lydia replied with a smile. "She's rewriting the rules as she goes. But yes, she's healthy and developing exactly as she should, just faster than average wolves." The sanctuary continued to grow around our daughter. More families arrived, drawn by stories of a place where children could be anything they dreamed. The school Margaret had envisioned became reality, with children from 17 different original packs learning together, playing together, forming friendships that would have been impossible under the old system. Thomas found his mate, a young woman named Jessica from Clearwater Pack, who shared his passion for justice and strategic thinking. Their wedding was the first celebrated under the new system, attended by wolves from 30 different territories. It was joyful, consensual, and free from the political machinations that had characterized Marcus's intended wedding to me. Speaking of Marcus, he'd vanished after the council's fall. Rumors placed him in the wilderness, trying to build a resistance movement among traditionalists who still believed in the old ways. But his support was thin. Most wolves had seen the evidence of council corruption and wanted no part of a return to those days. Isabella had been tried for her role in the deception and sentenced to community service in one of the new sanctuaries. Last I'd heard, she was actually thriving in the environment, having found purpose in teaching young wolves about the mistakes of the past. Redemption came in unexpected forms. My parents had reached out tentatively, asking to meet their granddaughter. Damien left the decision to me, and after much thought, I agreed. The meeting was awkward, strained, filled with unspoken apologies and regrets. But watching my mother hold Luna Rose, seeing genuine love in her eyes, I felt some of the old wounds begin to heal. "I'm sorry," my mother whispered, "for everything, for not protecting you, for going along with your father's plans. I was weak and you paid the price." "I paid a price," I agreed. "But look at what I gained. Would I have found Damien without Marcus's betrayal? Would I have discovered my strength without being forced to run? Sometimes the worst things lead to the best outcomes." My father struggled more with the new reality. His position as Beta had been predicated on the alliance with Marcus, and when that fell apart, he'd lost much of his influence in Moonhaven Pack. They'd replaced him with someone younger, more progressive. It was humbling for him, but perhaps necessary. "You were right," he said quietly during their second visit, watching Luna Rose toddle after Lily in the garden. "About everything. The old ways were cruel. I just couldn't see it because I benefited from them. It wasn't a full apology, but it was a start, and I'd learned that holding on to anger only poisoned yourself. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, but it did mean moving forward. When Luna Rose turned 2, we held a ceremony that had become tradition in our new society: the choosing. Unlike the old ways where a wolf's path was determined by birth and pack hierarchy, the choosing allowed even young children to declare their interests, their dreams, what they wanted to learn. Luna Rose, precocious as always, declared she wanted to learn everything. "That's ambitious," Damien said, scooping our daughter into his arms. "How about we start with something specific?" "Stories," Luna Rose said decisively. "Mama's stories, and Papa's fighting, and Grandmother Margaret's plants, and Uncle Thomas's planning, and Aunt Sarah's healing. Everything." The gathered wolves laughed, charmed by her enthusiasm. And over the following years, that's exactly what she learned: a little bit of everything from everyone who would teach her. She became a child raised by an entire community, loved and guided by dozens of wolves who each contributed something unique to her education. By the time Luna Rose was 5, the world had transformed beyond recognition from the one-eyed fled in a torn wedding dress. The Accords had expanded to include packs across North America, Central America, and even initial discussions with European territories. Sanctuaries like Shadowmere dotted the continent, providing homes for thousands of wolves who'd never fit into traditional pack structures. The council still existed, but in a radically different form: a rotating assembly of elected representatives rather than lifetime appointees, with term limits and transparency requirements. Victoria served as one of the primary architects of the new system, having fully committed to reformation. Nathaniel had been sentenced to supervised retirement in a remote territory, stripped of his authority but allowed to live in peace. Some called it too lenient, but I'd learned that cycles of revenge only perpetuated the old ways. Better to show mercy where possible and focus on building forward rather than punishing backward. True pairs had begun emerging across the continent. Not many, perhaps one every few months, but each one representing hope and possibility. They came to Shadowmere for training, to learn from Damien and me how to navigate the unique challenges and gifts of their bonds. A school within our school, teaching the next generation of revolutionaries how to lead with love instead of fear. Luna Rose thrived among these visiting pairs and their children. She made friends easily, her natural charisma and genuine warmth drawing others to her. But she also showed leadership qualities that suggested she'd inherited more than just power from her bloodline. She'd inherited wisdom beyond her years. "Mama," she asked one evening when she was 7, "why were the old ways so mean?" I considered how to explain complex history to a child who'd never lived under those conditions. Because people who are afraid try to control everything around them. The old council was afraid of change, afraid of losing power, afraid that without strict control everything would fall apart. But it didn't fall apart, Luna Rose observed. It got better. It did, I agreed. Because we replaced fear with trust. We believed wolves could choose to do the right thing without being forced, and mostly they do. Mostly, Luna Rose picked up on the qualifier. Sometimes wolves still make mistakes, I admitted. Sometimes packs have disputes, or individuals choose selfishness over community. But now we have ways to address those problems without cruelty. We mediate, we discuss, we find solutions that work for everyone. Luna Rose nodded thoughtfully, processing this. When I grow up, I want to help too. Help wolves who are still stuck in fear. My heart swelled with pride. I think you'll be excellent at that, sweetheart. Damien had been standing in the doorway, listening. After Luna Rose went to bed, he pulled me close. She's going to change the world even more than we did, he said quietly. She already is, I replied. Just by existing, by being proof that love and freedom can create something extraordinary. The years continued to pass in a blur of growth and change. Luna Rose started formal schooling, excelling at everything she tried, but particularly drawn to diplomacy and conflict resolution. Thomas and Jessica had twins, a boy and girl who became Luna Rose's constant companions. Sarah's daughter Lily came into her own as a talented artist, creating murals that decorated buildings throughout Shadowmere. Margaret passed away peacefully when Luna Rose was 9, surrounded by the community she'd helped build. Her funeral was attended by over 300 wolves, each one sharing a story about how she'd touched their lives. Luna Rose spoke too, her words simple but profound. Grandmother Margaret taught me that strength isn't about being the biggest or the strongest. It's about being kind when you don't have to be. About helping when no one's watching. About building things that last longer than you do. She was the strongest wolf I ever knew. There wasn't a dry eye in the gathering. New leaders emerged to fill the gaps left by the elders who'd been with us from the beginning. Adrian, fully redeemed from his days as a council enforcer, became one of our primary diplomats, traveling between territories to mediate disputes and teach the principles of the Accords. He'd mated with a female wolf from Clearwater Pack, and they were expecting their first child. The world wasn't perfect. There were still traditionalist packs that rejected the new ways, still alphas who ruled through fear and domination. But they were the minority now, increasingly isolated and irrelevant as younger wolves demanded better. When Luna Rose turned 11, she came to me with a question that showed how much the world had changed. Mama, at school today, some of the kids from visiting packs were talking about betas and omegas and rank structures. What does that mean? I realized with a start that my daughter had grown up in a world where those classifications were largely obsolete, remembered only by older wolves or those from traditionalist packs. Those were the old ways of categorizing wolves, I explained. Alphas were leaders, betas were second in command, omegas were considered weakest. Everyone had a designated place in the hierarchy. That sounds awful, Luna Rose said, wrinkling her nose. What if an omega was really good at something? Did they just not get to do it? Mostly yes, I confirmed. The system was rigid. You were born into a role and expected to stay there. I'm glad we don't do that anymore, Luna Rose said firmly. Everyone should get to be what they're good at, not what someone else decides. I agree, I said, hugging her close. And we have you to thank for that, in part. You and all the children born into this new world. You're proof that our way works. That evening, Damien and I discussed organizing a formal coming-of-age ceremony for Luna Rose. In traditional packs, wolves underwent trials around age 12 to determine their rank and place. We wanted something different, a celebration that honored who she was choosing to become, not who circumstances dictated she must be. What do you think she'll choose? Damien asked as we lay in bed, looking at the stars through our bedroom window. I think she'll choose to serve, I replied. Not because she has to, but because she genuinely wants to help others. She's seen what we've built and wants to continue the work. She's also seen the cost, Damien pointed out. The sacrifices, the struggles, the times we've been afraid. Does she understand what she'd be signing up for? Better than most, I said. She's grown up surrounded by wolves who've lived through the transformation. She knows it's not easy, but I don't think that will stop her. I was right when we presented the coming-of-age ceremony option to Luna Rose. She didn't hesitate. I want to take the oath, she said firmly. The same one you and Papa took. To serve the community, to protect those who need it, to lead with love instead of fear. You're only 11, I said gently, though pride surged through me. You have time to decide. There's no rush. But I am decided, Luna Rose insisted, her heterochromatic eyes. One silver, one dark, blazing with determination that reminded me so much of Damien. I've known what I wanted to do since I was little. I want to help wolves like you helped me. Like you helped everyone here. Damien and I exchanged glances, communicating through our mate bond. She's ready, he sent. Maybe not for everything, but ready to begin. I agreed. Our daughter had grown up surrounded by purpose and community. She'd seen leadership modeled not as domination, but as service. How could we deny her the chance to formally commit to those values? The coming-of-age ceremony took place on the autumn equinox, with representatives from over 50 territories in attendance. Luna Rose stood before the assembled crowd in a simple white dress, her dark hair braided with silver ribbons that caught the firelight. I, Luna Rose Blackwood, she said clearly, her young voice carrying across the silent gathering, pledge myself to the service of all wolves who seek freedom, safety, and belonging. I will lead with compassion, fight with wisdom, and love without condition. I will honor the sacrifices of those who came before me by building a future worthy of their dreams. The crowd erupted in cheers and howls of approval. Damien and I stepped forward to place a silver torque around her neck, the symbol of leadership in the new system, given not inherited. You make us proud, Damien said quietly, embracing our daughter. Every single day, I added, my voice thick with emotion. But the ceremony was interrupted by a commotion at the edge of the gathering. Wolves parted to reveal a figure I hadn't seen in over a decade, Marcus, looking weathered and older than his years. Damien moved immediately to intercept him, power radiating in waves. "You're not welcome here." "I know," Marcus said, holding up his hands in a gesture of peace. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here to apologize." The silence that followed was deafening. Every wolf present knew the history between us, the betrayal that had set everything in motion. "Apologize," I repeated, moving to stand beside Damien. "After 12 years? I know it's too little, too late," Marcus said, and I could hear genuine remorse in his voice. "But I've spent these years watching what you built, seeing how wrong I was about everything. The power I chased, the control I thought I needed. It meant nothing. It brought nothing but misery." "What do you want, Marcus?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral despite the old wounds his presence reopened. "Nothing," he said simply. "I just wanted you to know that I see it now. What you and Damien created. It's real leadership, real strength. Everything I pretended to have, but never actually possessed." He glanced at Luna Rose, and I saw something like wonder in his expression. "And your daughter, she's proof that love builds what fear can only destroy." Luna Rose, showing wisdom beyond her years, stepped forward. "Do you have a pack now, Marcus Blackwood?" "No," he admitted. "I'm a rogue. Have been since the council fell." "Then you're welcome here," Luna Rose said, her young voice carrying authority that made several wolves gasp. "If you're sincere about wanting to change, if you're willing to work for your place rather than demanding it, everyone deserves a chance at redemption." Damien started to protest, but I placed a hand on his arm. Through our bond, I sent understanding. This is her choice, her ceremony. Let her lead. After a long moment, Damien nodded. "If Luna Rose vouches for you, you may stay. But you'll start at the bottom, Marcus. No special treatment, no assumption of authority. You'll prove yourself through service, like everyone else." Marcus's relief was palpable. "Thank you, all of you. I won't waste this chance." As he was led away to be assigned quarters and duties, Catherine approached us. "That was quite the development," she observed. "Think he's sincere?" "Time will tell," I replied. "But Luna Rose is right. Everyone deserves a chance at redemption. We'd be hypocrites if we didn't offer the same opportunity we've given to so many others. Besides," Damien added with a slight smile, "having Marcus here, reformed and humble, sends a message. If he can change, anyone can." The celebration continued late into the night, but my mind kept drifting to the larger implications of what had just happened. Luna Rose's first major decision as a young leader had been to show mercy to someone who deeply wronged her parents. It was either profound wisdom or dangerous naivety. Only time would tell which. Over the following months, Marcus proved surprisingly dedicated to his rehabilitation. He worked in the kitchens, helped with construction projects, taught combat techniques to younger wolves. He never complained, never asked for special consideration, and slowly began to earn grudging respect from the community. Luna Rose took a particular interest in his progress, often spending time talking with him about his journey from arrogant alpha to humbled rogue to hopeful community member. "Why do you spend so much time with him?" I asked one evening, trying to understand my daughter's thinking. "Because he's a living example of transformation," Luna Rose replied thoughtfully. "If he can change, it proves that no one is beyond redemption. And that's important, Mama. We can't just write off the wolves who were raised in the old system. We have to help them adapt, or we're just creating a different kind of exclusion." Her insight humbled me. At 11 years old, she understood something I was still learning. That revolution wasn't just about tearing down the old, but about helping everyone transition to the new. A year after Luna Rose's ceremony, the First Continental Congress of Free Territories convened. It was a historic gathering, bringing together representatives from over 200 packs to formally codify the new system of werewolf governance. Damien and I attended as representatives of Shadowmere and the sanctuary network we'd helped establish. Luna Rose came too as the youngest delegate, her role symbolic but meaningful. The debates were intense, passionate, sometimes heated. Packs from different regions had different needs, different traditions, different visions for the future. But underlying everything was a shared commitment to the core principles. Consent over coercion, service over domination, community over hierarchy. Victoria, now gray-haired but still sharp, chaired the proceedings with practiced skill. She'd fully embraced her role as architect of the new order, using her political acumen to bridge divides and forge compromises. "The question before us," she said during a particularly contentious debate about enforcement mechanisms, "is how we maintain order without recreating the oppressive structures we've worked so hard to dismantle." Luna Rose raised her hand, the youngest voice in a room full of experienced leaders. Victoria recognized her with an encouraging nod. "What if we're thinking about it wrong?" Luna Rose said, her young voice clear but respectful. "We keep talking about enforcement and punishment, but that's old system thinking. What if instead we focus on prevention and support? Help packs solve their problems before they escalate. Provide resources and mediation instead of threats and sanctions." The room fell silent as wolves processed this perspective. Then Catherine spoke up. "The child makes a valid point. We've spent so much time defining what we're against that we haven't fully articulated what we're for. Perhaps it's time to shift that focus." The debate that followed was productive, eventually resulting in the creation of a new institution. The Council of Mediators, trained diplomats who would travel between territories helping resolve disputes before they required formal intervention. Adrian was appointed as one of the first mediators, along with a dozen others who'd proven skilled at conflict resolution. It was exactly the kind of proactive approach Luna Rose had advocated for. As the Congress continued over the following weeks, I watched my daughter engage with wolves decades older than her, contributing ideas, asking thoughtful questions, earning respect through wisdom rather than demanding it through rank. She was becoming exactly what we'd hoped, a leader for the new age. But not everything was peaceful progress. On the Congress's final day, news arrived that shook the Assembly. 3 traditionalist packs in the far north had formed a coalition, rejecting the accords entirely and declaring their intent to return to pure pack law. "They're calling themselves the True Path," the messenger reported, "and they're led by Alpha Nathaniel's grandson, Sebastian Frost. He claims his grandfather was right, that the new system is weakness, and that he'll restore the old order." The Assembly erupted in concerned murmurs. This was the challenge we'd all known would come eventually, a direct ideological rejection of everything we'd built. "How many wolves are we talking about?" Damien asked, his tactical mind immediately assessing the threat. "Currently about 500, the messenger replied. "But they're actively recruiting, particularly among younger wolves who never experienced the old council's cruelty and romanticize the strength of traditional leadership." "They're a minority," Catherine observed, "but a vocal and potentially violent one. We need to address this before it grows." "Military response," one of the more hardline alphas suggested. "No," I said firmly, standing to address the Assembly. "Violence is what they expect, what they want. It would prove their narrative that we're weak and afraid. We need a different approach." "What do you suggest?" Victoria asked. "Dialogue," I said. "Send mediators, yes, but also open invitation. Let these wolves see what we've built firsthand. Let them meet families like Sarah's, or reformed wolves like Marcus. Let them see that strength doesn't have to mean cruelty. And if they refuse dialogue," another alpha pressed. "Then we contain them," Damien said, backing my approach. "Create a perimeter, cut off their recruitment, and wait. Let time and observation do the work. Eventually, they'll either choose to join us or become so irrelevant that their ideology dies with them." The Assembly debated for hours, but ultimately adopted a modified version of our approach. Adrian and a team of mediators would attempt contact with the True Path Coalition. Meanwhile, patrols would monitor their borders and counter their recruitment efforts with truth. Stories from wolves who'd lived under both systems and could testify which was actually stronger. As the Congress concluded and delegates departed, Luna Rose came to me with a request that both terrified and impressed me. "I want to go with the mediation team," she said. "To the True Path territories." "Absolutely not," I replied immediately. "It's too dangerous." "Mama, I'm the proof they need to see," Luna Rose insisted. "I'm a true pair child raised in the new system. I can show them that we're not weak, that love doesn't mean softness. Please, let me help." Damien joined us, having overheard through our bond. "Elena, she has a point, and she wouldn't be alone. We'd go with her. The 3 of us together would be powerful testimony." I wanted to refuse, to keep our daughter safe in Shadowmere where I could protect her. But I'd spent 12 years building a world where wolves could choose their own paths. How could I deny that choice to my own daughter? "We go together," I said finally. "As a family." And at the first sign of real danger, we leave. Agreed. Luna Rose hugged me fiercely. Agreed. Thank you, Mama. The journey to the Northern Territories took 2 weeks, traveling with Adrian's mediation team and a small security detail. The landscape grew harsher as we traveled, the forests giving way to tundra and rocky highlands. The True Path Coalition had established their headquarters in an old fortress that had been abandoned decades ago. As we approached, wolves in traditional pack uniforms, rigid ranks clearly displayed, watched from the walls with hostile expressions. State your business, one of them called down. We're here to speak with Alpha Sebastian, Adrian called back. We come in peace, under the flag of mediation. After a tense wait, the gates opened. We were led into a courtyard where Sebastian Frost waited. A young Alpha, perhaps 30, with his grandfather's cold eyes, but none of his political skill. So the revolutionaries come to our door, he said, his voice dripping with disdain. Come to convince us to abandon our traditions and embrace your weakness? We've come to talk, I replied calmly. To understand your concerns and share our experiences. I know your experiences, Sebastian sneered. You destroyed my grandfather, tore down everything he built, created chaos masquerading as freedom. Did we? Luna Rose spoke up, stepping forward despite my instinctive move to protect her. Because from what I've seen, there's less chaos now than there was under the old council. Fewer wars, fewer wolves dying from abuse and neglect. How is that weaker? Sebastian's attention focused on my daughter, and I saw him reassess. You're the true pair child, Luna Rose Blackwood. I am, she confirmed. And I've lived my entire life in the weak system you're criticizing. Want to test which of us is actually stronger? I started to protest, but Damien's hand on my arm stopped me. Let her prove herself, he sent through our bond. She needs this. Sebastian laughed, genuinely amused. You're 12 years old. What could you possibly? He didn't finish because Luna Rose had shifted, partial transformation, something most adult wolves struggled with, and moved faster than he could track, sweeping his legs and putting him on his back in under 3 seconds. I'm 12 years old and I just took down an alpha, Luna Rose said, shifting back to human form and offering him a hand up. Not because I'm special, but because I've been trained by a community that values skill over rank. That's not weakness, that's efficiency. Sebastian accepted her hand, climbing to his feet with a new expression, respect mixed with confusion. How did you? Training starts at age 4 in our system, Luna Rose explained. Everyone learns self-defense, regardless of their bloodline or gender. Everyone learns diplomacy, healing, strategy. We don't limit wolves based on what we think they should be. We help them become what they can be. That's not what my grandfather said about your system, Sebastian admitted. Your grandfather was trying to hold on to power, I said gently. He told you what served his purposes, not necessarily what was true. But you don't have to take our word for it. Come visit Shadowmere. See for yourself. Bring your wolves, spend a month observing how we actually live. Then make your choice based on reality, not propaganda. Sebastian hesitated, clearly torn between the ideology he'd been raised with and what he'd just witnessed. What's the catch? He asked finally. There's always a catch. The catch is that you might realize you've been wrong, Damien said bluntly. That you've been fighting for a system that only served a few at the expense of many. That's a hard thing to admit, but it's also the first step toward actual strength. The negotiations continued for 3 days. Sebastian's coalition was divided. Some wolves eager to see the new system for themselves, others convinced it was a trap. But Luna Rose's demonstration had planted seeds of doubt. If a 12-year-old from the weak system could defeat an alpha trained in traditional combat, what else might they have wrong? Eventually, Sebastian agreed to send a delegation to Shadowmere for a month-long observation period. It was a small victory, but victories in changing hearts and minds always were. As we traveled home, I reflected on how much had changed since that terrible day when I'd discovered Marcus's betrayal. I'd been a broken woman fleeing in a torn wedding dress, believing my life was over. Instead, it had been beginning. You're thinking deep thoughts, Damien observed, his arm around my shoulders as we walked. I'm thinking about destiny, I replied. About how the worst day of my life led to the best things. Meeting you, building Shadowmere, raising Luna Rose. If Marcus hadn't betrayed me, then someone else would have, Damien finished. The mate bond was always there, Elena. We would have found each other eventually. The path might have been different, but the destination was inevitable. Do you believe that? I asked. That we were destined. I believe we were compatible, he said thoughtfully. That our strengths and weaknesses complemented each other perfectly. Whether that's destiny or biology or random chance. Does it matter? We chose each other. We keep choosing each other. That's what's real. Luna Rose, walking ahead of us, called back. Are you two being philosophical again? Because we have actual planning to do for the delegation visit. I laughed. She's right. We do. The delegation from the True Path Coalition arrived at Shadowmere 6 weeks later. 12 wolves, including Sebastian, escorted by neutral mediators. They came expecting to find weakness, chaos, wolves barely surviving without proper leadership. Instead, they found a thriving community. Children playing safely while adults worked. Elderly wolves treated with respect and given meaningful roles. Disputes handled through discussion rather than dominance. Wolves from dozens of different original packs working together without rigid hierarchy. Sebastian spent his first week in visible confusion, constantly asking how things functioned without clear alpha authority. Luna Rose appointed herself his guide, patiently explaining the systems we'd developed. But who decides when there's a disagreement? He asked after witnessing a community meeting where budget priorities were debated. Everyone with a stake in the outcome, Luna Rose explained. We discuss, we compromise, we find solutions that work for the most people. It takes longer than one alpha just deciding, but the results last longer because everyone's invested. And if someone refuses to compromise, then they're free to leave, Luna Rose said simply. No one's forced to stay here. But most wolves choose to stay because they've discovered that having a voice in decisions is more valuable than being told what to do. By the second week, I noticed Sebastian's wolves integrating into community activities. One joined Thomas's tactical training sessions and was surprised to find females learning the same skills as males. Another helped Sarah in the medical center and was amazed that healing knowledge was shared freely rather than hoarded by specialists. The breakthrough came in the third week. A dispute arose between two wolves over shared resources. Exactly the kind of situation that would have been resolved by alpha decree in a traditional pack. Instead, they brought it to community mediation, with Sebastian watching from the audience. The mediator, one of Marcus's former pack members, guided the discussion patiently. Both wolves explained their perspectives, their needs, their concerns. The community offered suggestions. Eventually, a compromise emerged that both parties accepted. That took 2 hours, Sebastian observed to me afterward. An alpha could have decided in 2 minutes. An alpha could have decided, I agreed. But would both wolves have been satisfied? Would they have felt heard? Or would resentment have festered, leading to bigger problems down the road? Sebastian was quiet for a long moment. You're saying the time investment prevents future conflicts. Exactly, I confirmed. Prevention is always more efficient than resolution. The old system prioritized speed over satisfaction. We prioritize lasting solutions over quick fixes. On their final day, Sebastian requested a private meeting with Damien, Luna Rose, and me. We gathered in our home, and I could see he was struggling with something profound. I came here expecting to confirm everything my grandfather told me, he said finally. That your system was weak, unsustainable, built on naive idealism. Instead, I found... He paused, searching for words. I found something that actually works. Something that makes wolves happy instead of just obedient. What will you tell your coalition? Damien asked. The truth, Sebastian replied. That we've been fighting for a system that served our pride more than our people. That there's a better way, if we're brave enough to try it. He looked at Luna Rose. Your daughter asked me on the first day which of us was stronger. I think I have the answer now. You are. Not because you have more power, but because you don't need to use it. That's real strength. The True Path Coalition didn't disband overnight. Change never happens that quickly. But they did begin reforms. Introducing consensus building, ending forced rankings, allowing wolves more choice in their paths. It was a start, and it sent ripples across the continent. If even hardline traditionalists could change, what excuse did anyone else have? 5 years later, when Luna Rose turned 17, the world looked very different from the one-eyed fled at 26. The Accords had expanded to encompass nearly 90% of packs in North America, with parallel movements emerging in Europe and Asia. The Sanctuary Network had grown to include over 300 communities, serving tens of thousands of wolves who might not have survived under the old system. Luna Rose had become one of the most effective mediators in the new order. Her unique combination of true pair power, diplomatic skill, and genuine compassion making her invaluable in resolving conflicts. She'd negotiated peace between feuding packs, helped reform traditionalist communities, and inspired a generation of young wolves who'd grown up believing that leadership meant service. She'd also found her own mate, a young male from Catherine's pack named Ryan who shared her passion for justice and her gift for bringing out the best in others. Watching them together, seeing the mate bond form naturally rather than through manipulation or politics, filled me with joy. This was what I'd fought for. Wolves choosing their own paths, their own partners, their own futures. The ceremony recognizing their bond was attended by representatives from 70 territories. It was joyful, consensual, and free from any taint of politics or power plays. Just two young wolves choosing each other, supported by communities that celebrated their happiness. "Remember your wedding?" Damien asked quietly as we watched Luna Rose and Ryan exchange vows. "I remember fleeing my wedding," I corrected with a smile. "That disaster led to this. To you, to Luna Rose, to everything we've built. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd gone through with it?" he asked. "If you'd married Marcus?" "I'd be dead," I said simply. "He'd have killed me once I'd served his purpose. But even if I'd survived, I'd have been hollow, living a lie, trapped in a system that saw me as property. No, there's no version of that story that ends well." "Then I'm grateful for Marcus's betrayal," Damien said. "As terrible as it was for you to experience, it brought you to me. It taught me my own strength," I corrected. "You helped me understand and develop that strength, but it was always there. I just needed circumstances desperate enough to reveal it." Luna Rose and Ryan's wedding celebration lasted 3 days. A joyful blending of traditions from multiple packs, creating something new from many different threads. It was emblematic of everything we'd built, honoring the past while creating the future, respecting tradition while embracing change. Marcus attended, now fully integrated into Shadowmere society. He'd become one of our most effective teachers, using his experiences with both the old and new systems to help young wolves understand why change had been necessary. It was the ultimate redemption arc. The wolf who'd once embodied everything wrong with the old system, now helping to ensure it never returned. "Thank you," he said to me during the reception, "for giving me the chance to become someone better. I know I don't deserve. Everyone deserves the chance to change," I interrupted gently. "That's the entire point of everything we've built. You took that chance seriously, Marcus. You did the work. That's what matters." As the celebration wound down and guests began departing, Luna Rose approached Damien and me with Ryan at her side. "We want to start our own sanctuary," she announced, "in the Western Territories where the Accords are still struggling to take hold. Build something like Shadowmere, but adapted to that region's specific needs." Pride surged through me, mixed with parental worry. "That's a big undertaking." "I know," Luna Rose said confidently, "but you've taught me well. Both of you have. And Ryan's family has connections in that region that will help. We're ready." I looked at Damien, communicating through our bond. "She is ready," he confirmed. "Time to let her fly." "Then go with our blessing," I said, pulling my daughter into a hug. "Build something beautiful. Change the world like we did." "Like you're still doing," Luna Rose corrected. "This isn't finished, Mama. We're just expanding it." Over the following decade, Luna Rose and Ryan did exactly that. Their sanctuary, named Rising Sun, became a beacon in the Western Territories, proving that the new system could adapt to different cultures and contexts. They trained a new generation of mediators, established schools that blended traditional pack knowledge with progressive values, and slowly transformed one of the most conservative regions in North America. Meanwhile, Shadowmere continued to evolve. We celebrated our 20th anniversary as a sanctuary, marking 2 decades of continuous operation. 347 wolves now called it home, including second-generation children who'd been born here and knew nothing of the old system except as history. Thomas and Jessica's twins, now adults themselves, had become leaders in their own right, one focusing on education reform and the other on economic development. Sarah's daughter Lily had become a renowned artist, her murals decorating sanctuaries across the continent. Adrian's children were training as mediators like their father. And throughout it all, Damien and I remained the constants, older now, with silver threading through our dark hair, but still bonded as deeply as ever. The mate bond hadn't faded with time. If anything, it had grown stronger, richer, more complex. Do you ever regret it? I asked one evening as we sat on our platform, watching the sunset paint the sky. The quiet life you had before I crashed into your territory? Damien laughed. Quiet. Elena, I was the Shadow King, feared, isolated, constantly fighting to protect my territory from those who saw it as a prize to be taken. My life was never quiet. But it was yours, I pressed. And I changed everything. You did, he agreed, pulling me closer. You changed my lonely existence into a life worth living. You gave me purpose beyond survival, family beyond duty, love beyond anything I'd imagined possible. Do I regret that? Never. Not for a single moment. We sat in comfortable silence, watching our community settle in for the evening. Children playing final games before bedtime. Adults sharing stories around cooking fires. Elders passing down wisdom to younger generations. It was peaceful, prosperous, exactly what we'd fought to create. Grandmother, a young voice called out. We looked down to see our granddaughter, Luna Rose and Ryan's daughter, named Elena after me, waving enthusiastically. Tell us the story, the one about how you escaped. I smiled, recognizing the ritual. The story of my flight from Moonhaven, my meeting with Damien, the revolution that followed. It had become legend among the younger wolves, told and retold until it had taken on mythic proportions. Not tonight, little one, I called back. It's getting late. Tomorrow, then? She persisted with her mother's determination. Tomorrow, I promised. As night fell completely and stars emerged overhead, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. From a torn wedding dress to a revolutionary movement. From a terrified refugee to a leader who'd helped reshape society. From despair to hope, from isolation to community, from oppression to freedom. The world wasn't perfect. There were still packs that clung to the old ways, still wolves who suffered under traditional hierarchies, still work to be done. But it was better, measurably, undeniably better than it had been. And the next generation, Luna Rose, young Elena, and thousands like them, were carrying the torch forward, adapting our principles to new challenges, building on what we'd started. What are you thinking? Damien asked, feeling my emotions through our bond. I'm thinking about legacy, I replied. About how the things we build outlive us. About how the worst day of my life became the catalyst for the best things I've ever done. Funny how that works, Damien observed. The moments that break us are often the ones that remake us into something stronger. Did you always know? I asked suddenly. That first day in the forest, when you found me, did you know what we'd become? Damien was quiet for a long moment, considering. I knew you were special, he said finally. I knew the mate bond was real. But did I know we'd start a revolution? That we'd change the entire structure of werewolf society? No. I just knew I wanted to protect you, to give you a chance to heal and discover your strength. And I wanted to prove I wasn't weak, I said softly. That Marcus had been wrong about me. He was, Damien confirmed. About everything. You're the strongest wolf I've ever known, Elena. Not because of your bloodline or your power, but because of your courage. The courage to run when running was the only option, to trust when trust seemed impossible, to love when love had betrayed you. I turned to face him, cupping his face in my hands. We did this together. None of it would have been possible without you. Then we're agreed, Damien said, smiling. We're both remarkable, our daughter is extraordinary, and we've built something that will last for generations. Agreed, I said, sealing it with a kiss that still made my heart race after 20 years. The night deepened, and eventually we retired to our home, wrapped in each other and the mate bond that had proven unbreakable through revolution, war, and the simple wearing away of years. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to continue the work we'd started. But tonight, we were simply Elena and Damien, mates, partners, wolves who'd found each other in the darkness and built a beacon that illuminated the path for thousands. The revolution we'd started continued, and it would continue long after we were gone, carried forward by wolves who'd grown up believing that love was stronger than fear, that choice was more powerful than coercion, that everyone deserved the chance to choose their own path. It was the legacy we'd fought for, and it was worth every sacrifice. Epilogue, 20 years later. From the Journal of Elena Rivers Blackwood, age 66. Today marks 40 years since I fled Moonhaven in a torn wedding dress, terrified and heartbroken, certain my life was ending. I could never have imagined then what it would become. Damien and I are officially retired now, having passed primary leadership of Shadowmere to younger wolves better equipped for the challenges of a changing world. We still advise, still mediate when asked, but the day-to-day work belongs to the next generation. Luna Rose and Ryan's Sanctuary network has grown to include 23 communities across the Western Territories. Their children, we have 4 grandchildren now, are growing up in a world so different from the one I knew that they struggle to comprehend how things used to be. Little Elena, now 12 herself, asked me yesterday why anyone would ever want to force someone to mate with them. She genuinely couldn't understand the concept. In her world, bonds form naturally or not at all, and the idea of arranged matings seems as archaic as arranged marriages due to modern humans. I tried to explain about politics, about power, about how fear makes people do terrible things, but I could see she didn't really grasp it. And that's exactly what we fought for, a generation that finds the old ways not just wrong, but incomprehensible. The Accords have expanded globally now. Pack structures in Europe, Asia, even Australia have adopted similar principles. There are still traditionalist holdouts. There probably always will be, but they're increasingly isolated, increasingly irrelevant. Marcus passed away last year, peacefully in his sleep at age 72. His funeral was attended by over 200 wolves, remarkable for someone who'd once been so reviled. He'd spent his final decades teaching, mentoring, helping young wolves understand both systems so they could appreciate what they had. In his will, he left me a letter. In it, he finally gave me the apology I'd never demanded but perhaps needed. He thanked me for showing him there was another way to live, for giving him the chance to become someone he could respect. He said that being rejected by me was the best thing that ever happened to him, because it forced him to confront who he'd become and choose something better. I cried reading it, not from old pain but from gratitude that even the worst people can change if given the chance and the courage to take it. Damien's health is declining. The healer says it's simply age. We're both well beyond the average lifespan for wolves, probably extended by the true pair bond. But his wolf is tired, ready to rest after decades of fighting, building, protecting. We've talked about what comes next. The mate bond means we'll likely pass within a short time of each other. True pairs rarely survive long alone, but we're at peace with it. We've lived full lives, rich lives, lives that mattered. Luna Rose has promised to carry on, to continue the work, to keep building the world we dreamed of. And I trust her completely. She's proven herself 1,000 times over, shown that she inherited not just our power, but our values, our commitment to something larger than ourselves. As I write this, Damien is sleeping peacefully beside me, and through our bond, I can feel his contentment. We've done what we set out to do. Changed the world. Made it better. Created space for wolves like little Elena to grow up free. If I could go back and tell that terrified woman in the torn wedding dress one thing, it would be this. Your life isn't ending. It's beginning. The path ahead will be harder than anything you've imagined, but it will also be richer, fuller, more meaningful than your wildest dreams. Run toward the unknown. Trust the terrifying things. Choose the scary path, because that's where life is waiting. And never, ever doubt your own strength. You're more powerful than anyone has ever told you. You're braver than you know, and you're about to change the world. With love and gratitude for a life well lived, Elena. From the diary of Elena Rose Blackwood, age 16. Today I learned something really important from great-grandmother Elena, who passed away peacefully last night with great-grandfather Damien at her side. She'd been slipping in and out of consciousness all week, but this morning she woke up clear-eyed and asked to see me. "Tell me what you've learned," she said, her voice weak but steady. "From growing up in the world we built." I told her about the school where I learned not just from teachers, but from elders, peers, and even younger children. About the community meetings where my voice matters as much as any adult's. About the sanctuary networks that now span 6 continents, providing homes for wolves who need them. I told her about my friends, true pair bonds forming naturally, wolves choosing their own paths regardless of bloodline, conflicts resolved through dialogue instead of dominance. "And do you understand why it almost wasn't this way?" she asked, her silver eyes, so like mine, holding my gaze. "Why we had to fight for it?" "I'm trying to," I admitted. "But it's hard to imagine anyone wanting the old system. It seems so, unnecessarily cruel. Great-grandmother Elena smiled, the same smile I'd seen in 1,000 photographs and paintings. Good, she said softly. That's exactly right. It should be incomprehensible to you. That means we succeeded. She was quiet for a moment, gathering strength. But Elena, listen carefully. Just because something is incomprehensible doesn't mean it can't return. Every generation has to choose freedom, has to actively work to maintain it. The moment we think it's permanent, the moment we stop being vigilant, that's when the old ways creep back in. I understand, I said, taking her frail hand in mine. Do you? She challenged gently. Because I need you to understand something crucial. The world you've inherited, it's not a gift. It's a responsibility. You and your generation will face challenges we never imagined, threats we didn't prepare you for. And you'll have to adapt our principles to new circumstances while staying true to the core values. What kind of challenges? I asked, suddenly frightened. I don't know, she admitted. That's the point. Every generation faces its own battles. Ours was against the council and traditionalist thinking. Yours might be against complacency, or new forms of control we can't even conceive of yet. But whatever comes, remember this. Real strength is choosing love when fear seems safer. Real courage is trusting others when betrayal seems more likely. Real leadership is serving when dominating would be easier. She pressed something into my hand, a small silver pendant I'd never seen before. This was given to me by your great-grandfather Damien on the night we completed our mate bond. It's been passed down through our family, and now I'm giving it to you. I examined it, a wolf and a crescent moon intertwined, with an inscription I could barely make out. Freedom is not given. It is chosen every day by every wolf. Wear it, great-grandmother Elena whispered. Remember it, and when you face your generation's trials, know that you come from a line of wolves who chose the hard path because it was the right one. She closed her eyes then, seeming to rest. But before I could leave, she spoke once more. I'm proud of you, little Elena. You're going to do remarkable things. Things that will make even our revolution seem small in comparison. The world is changing faster now, becoming more complex. You'll need to be clever, adaptable, brave. But you will be, because you're a Blackwood, and we don't give up. Ever. Those were the last words she spoke to me. By evening, both she and great-grandfather Damien had passed, within minutes of each other, the mate bond carrying them together even into death. The funeral yesterday was attended by thousands. Wolves traveled from every continent, from sanctuaries and traditional packs alike, to honor the couple who'd changed everything. Even some of the remaining traditionalist packs sent representatives, acknowledging that regardless of ideology, great-grandmother Elena and great-grandfather Damien had been historically significant. Mom spoke at the service, her voice strong despite her tears. My parents taught me that revolution isn't a moment, it's a commitment. It's choosing, every single day, to do better than the day before, to lift up those who've fallen, to question systems that harm, to build bridges instead of walls. She looked directly at me then. And now it's your generation's turn. Take what we've built and make it better. Find the flaws we couldn't see and fix them. Face the challenges we couldn't anticipate and overcome them. That's the legacy my parents left. Not a perfect system, but a commitment to constant improvement. As I write this, wearing the pendant great-grandmother Elena gave me, I'm thinking about what she said. About how every generation has to choose freedom. About how the world I've grown up in, where true pairs form naturally, where sanctuaries provide homes, where wolves choose their own paths, isn't permanent unless we actively maintain it. I'm only 16, but I can already see the challenges she warned about. Technology is changing how packs communicate, creating new opportunities but also new divisions. Climate change is forcing migrations, creating resource conflicts. Some young wolves, never having experienced oppression, are starting to romanticize the strength and simplicity of the old hierarchies. And then there are the humans. For generations, we've operated mostly separately, with limited interaction. But that's changing. Human populations are expanding into traditional wolf territories. They're developing technologies that can detect us more easily. Soon we'll have to decide how to interact with them, as equals, as superiors, or as species that need to coexist. These aren't problems great-grandmother Elena and great-grandfather Damien faced. These are my generation's trials. And I'm scared, but I'm also excited. Because if they could transform werewolf society from a rigid hierarchy into a federation of free territories, what might we be able to do? If they could create peace from centuries of conflict, what bridges might we build? Great-grandmother Elena told me I'd do remarkable things. I don't know if that's true, but I know I'm going to try. I'm going to honor her legacy not by preserving it unchanged, but by adapting it to new challenges while staying true to the core values. Consent over coercion, service over domination, community over hierarchy, love over fear. Tomorrow, I start my formal training as a mediator. In 5 years, I'll be eligible to establish my own sanctuary if I choose, or join the Continental Congress, or travel as an ambassador to territories that haven't yet adopted the Accords. The future is full of possibilities and dangers in equal measure. But I come from a line of wolves who ran toward the danger because that's where the important work waited. Great-grandmother Elena fled into the wildlands alone. She faced down the council. She sacrificed her freedom to save her community. She and great-grandfather Damien built something that lasted 4 decades and continues growing. That's the legacy I'm inheriting. Not a finished product, but a commitment to keep building, keep improving, keep choosing freedom even when it's hard. So here's my promise, great-grandmother Elena, wherever you are, I will carry on your work. I will adapt it to my time. I will face my generation's challenges with the same courage you showed facing yours. And when I'm old and it's time to pass the torch again, I'll make sure the next generation understands what you taught me. Freedom is not given. It is chosen every day by every wolf. I choose freedom. I choose love. I choose to build something even better than what you left me. Thank you for everything. Rest well, knowing your revolution continues. With love and determination. Elena Rose Blackwood. Age 16. Heir to a legacy of freedom. The end.